Hello everyone. We hope you're doing well. We're doing great, and we truly appreciate your ongoing support. We'd like to briefly address some comments regarding our audiobook series. Rest assured, progress is ongoing. That said, your feedback is vital. If there's a novel you particularly enjoy and want to hear more of, please let us know in the comments. Each chapter requires a financial investment, so we can only continue series that receive strong audience interest. Although we retain core names and plot lines, we make significant editorial changes to enhance clarity, pacing, and immersion. These are not simple recitations. We work hard to deliver a polished, thoughtful listening experience. Without sufficient feedback or engagement, we may need to discontinue a series. So if you're enjoying something, don't stay silent. Your input truly matters. Note, our default audio speed is 3x. If that's too fast, let us know. We're happy to adjust it. Interested in early access to unreleased audiobooks? Visit our Patreon. You'll get to experience new content before it reaches YouTube. Just to clarify, I'm a fan like you. I've purchased these novels and adapted them with care, while respecting all rights and guidelines. For updates, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, X. YouTube update: recently, YouTube flagged some of our content for including mature themes, realistic violence, and darker story elements. As a result, we've decided to stop uploading anything that violates YouTube's guidelines. If you'd like access to the full, uncut versions including the more intense or mature content, you can find them on our Patreon page, where we upload everything first. Available now on Patreon: Shattered Innocence transmigrated into a novel as an extra. Transmigrating over 10,000 years late, I was forced to become a mighty presence. I, the celestial dragon, rule the heavens through the double gate, reigning supreme in countless worlds with beast taming, Tower of God sequence strength, cultivation when you take things to the extreme. Naruto is an Uchiha with cyst. WTF, the centuries-old ancestor in our family take concubine again. Plus 18, Ichi, reincarnated in Bleach as a wizard. Thanks for listening and happy listening, urging his fellow great sages to hold their ground. Do not let anger cloud your judgment. Aladdin's face was dark as he suppressed the intense rage burning within him. In a deep voice, he said, as of now, all 12 sub-god pillars have fallen into Fang Heng's hands. The 3 demon-suppressing temples have been destroyed by him. Even if we rush back to provide reinforcements, it will be of no use. Indeed. The situation had already reached this point. The Holy Court had already paid a heavy price. Returning to deal with Fang Heng now? Not only would the losses be irreparable, but they could also endanger the God King. I understand. You're right, Aladdin, Dean said, taking a deep breath and once again channeling his holy power to focus his fury on suppressing Suzu. In his intense anger, Dean pushed his strength to its limits. The holy light once again blazed with blinding radiance. Aladdin and the other great sage exchanged a glance before both shook their heads, allowing Dion to vent his anger. Around them, the bishops and high priests of the Holy Realm, aware of the great sage's foul mood, didn't dare speak further. Instead, they poured their strength into the barrier, assisting the great sages in suppressing Suzu. A moment later, 30 minutes passed. Dean's emotions began to settle somewhat. He knew very well that, in the short term, there was no way to directly deal with Suzu. But soon, the monster within the God King was already stirring violently. The outcome was near. A result would be determined within 24 hours. Suddenly, hurried footsteps were heard approaching from outside the Great Hall. Chapter 2784, Enduring the guard rushed in again, kneeling on one knee. Aladdin paused the control of the holy universe and asked, "What is it?" "Speak." "Report to the 3 great sages," the guard said. "Each of the sub-god pillars, including those, has been attacked by the demonic seed. They have been completely occupied by the demonic seed, and then..." Outrageous. Dean immediately became furious upon hearing this. These were the temples of the Holy Court, built with the elite efforts of millions of years. Now, they had been taken over by demons? The damage wasn't severe, but the insult was immense. "Speak. What happened after they occupied the temples?" The guard shrank his neck and cautiously glanced at everyone. "There are reports that after taking over the sub-god pillars and the great halls, they moved the decorations and priestly artifacts. Then..." The guard's voice became quieter. "Then they dismantled the great halls and transferred them through teleportation to the lower realm." Fang Heng. How dare he? Dean, unable to contain his anger, struck the ground heavily with his scepter, shouting furiously, "What exactly does he want to do? Great sage, please remain calm. This act is just to provoke us." Aladdin, though furious, secretly admired Fang Heng's tactics. Even though he had been thoroughly enraged by Fang Heng's actions, his emotions stirred, and he almost wanted to slay Fang Heng right then and there. But he still needed to remain calm. One wrong move and everything would be lost. Dean's eyes turned red as he hissed, Feng Heng. And Suzu? I swear I will make sure you both have no place to rest in death. Not far away, on the second floor of the Temple of the Gods, the God King sat quietly, his face calm. A face began to slowly materialize on the back of his neck. Suzu frowned. Was the Holy Realm starting to fight back? Her situation was also dire. She was being suppressed by the full force of the Holy Realm, and her abilities were severely limited. If the Beetle King she had cultivated couldn't seize the body of the God King, she might lose. In the teleportation passage of the Holy Realm, Wu Yan and Niximi stood, watching as zombies and members of the Godwing tribe continuously moved through the teleportation passages, transporting materials and resources from the various sub-god pillars back to the lower realm. They were momentarily silent. With the King of God's pillars passage cut off and the Holy Realm distracted by its chaos, did Feng Heng truly intend to clear out all 12 sub-god pillars? Soon, they even saw zombies transporting stone blocks from the dismantled temples into the teleportation passage. Well. They were even taking the stones apart now. The two exchanged a look, almost instinctively. It was probably because of the lack of time, otherwise, Feng Heng's target might not have been just the 12 sub-god pillars. He likely wouldn't spare even the remaining smaller god pillars. As a teleportation passage flashed with light, Niximi nodded and said, Wu Yan, he's back. Feng Heng had destroyed 3 demon-suppressing temples in succession and then proceeded to inspect all the possible locations related to the Holy Realm's orb, as indicated by the books in the Holy Library. He checked each one meticulously. However, after thoroughly inspecting all the suspicious sites, he returned to his group with some disappointment. He had found nothing, no leads linking to the creation orb. It wasn't a complete waste, though. At least after his careful examination, the zombie clones would scour and dismantle every temple in the sub-god pillars and bring the spoils back to the zombie apocalypse. Additionally, several other unknown locations in the lower world were explored with the help of the Godwing tribe, but no clues were found there either. So, it seemed most likely that the orb was hidden in the creation temple at the King of God's pillar. The God-given orb was probably the one he was searching for from the Holy Realm. He was bound to head to the King of God's pillar. While Feng Heng was lost in thought, a strange wriggling sensation appeared again in the muscles on his arm. After a few contortions, Suzu's face once again formed within the muscle. Feng Heng, I've been waiting for you for a long time. What are you waiting for? The Holy Court's power has already been activated. My strength can't last much longer. If we continue like this, I will surely lose, and you will all die. Don't rush me, it's already in motion. As per your request, the Temple of Faith in the lower world has been destroyed almost entirely. The Holy Realm can no longer absorb the power of faith from the other sub-god pillars. Additionally, I helped you eliminate the starry temples at those sub-god pillars, and I've disrupted the flow of the Holy Realm's faith power. But now, with the people of the Holy Realm blocking their way, I have no way of proceeding. Suzu furrowed her brows. You've already destroyed the temples of faith? Why hasn't their power been weakened? Are you lying to me? Feng Heng sneered dismissively. Sometimes, maybe you should look inward and ask yourself if your plan went wrong somewhere. What do you mean? Humphrey, you underestimated the Holy Court. Over the past 100,000 years, they've built a starry temple at the King of God's pillar, where they've stored vast amounts of the power of faith. Disrupting the temples of faith below only severed the source of the faith supply. The energy stored in the starry temple is enough to sustain them for a long time. Therefore, you miscalculated. Your failure has nothing to do with us. Got it? Susan? Feng Heng curled his lip in disdain. He had already had a rough idea about this. It was obvious from the Holy Court's reaction. If the Holy Court wasn't confident, why would they have stationed troops at the King of God's pillar? They had made thorough preparations and knew that as long as the King of God's pillar wasn't destroyed, they could still win even if they abandoned all the smaller details. Then, Feng Heng discovered that starry temples had been built at every sub-god pillar, and it immediately clicked for him. If there were starry temples at the sub-god pillars, how could the King of God's pillar not have one? He casually asked a companion from the Holy Court, and indeed, they had built the largest starry temple at the King of God's pillar. I admit my miscalculation, Feng Heng, Suzu said after a brief pause, her tone cold. Given this situation, I need you all to gather and find a way to destroy the Faith Temple at the King of God's pillar and wipe out the energy the Holy Court has accumulated over the years. Only then can I regain the advantage. Don't joke. The Holy Realm has heavy forces stationed there. Why should we go? How can you possibly defeat them? Are you relying on these cannon fodder from the Hell Gate? That's your problem, Feng Heng. I'm here to get you to solve mine. Suzu fell silent for a moment before continuing in a chilling tone, hurry up and act. I can't hold on much longer. If I die, you'll all die with me. As she spoke, her twisted right arm slowly began to heal. Fang Hang sneered. So now, when her words couldn't get through, she resorted to threats. It wasn't even worth his time. But putting Suzu aside, since he couldn't find any clues related to the orb in the lower realm, he had no choice but to head to the King of God's pillar. The Holy Realm was currently tangled up with Suzu and in a state of chaos. That was undoubtedly his best opportunity. Everyone, I'm leaving this to you. I'm going to the King of God's pillar to check the situation. Ginger and the others will join us later. Don't rush, wait for my signal before taking action. Niximi's heart stirred at the words. So, he had already been planning to move against the King of God's pillar. Understood. Chapter 2785, King of God's Pillar. Since all teleportation passages to the King of God's Pillar had already been closed, Fang Hang could only approach the King of God's Pillar through the teleportation passage of the Godwing tribe in the lower world. He then transformed into a bat form and flew directly toward the King of God's Pillar. The closer he got to the King of God's Pillar, the more prominent the massive pillar of light rising from its center became. When he reached the high, towering disc area of the King of God's Pillar, Fang Hang switched back to his sacred study form and leaped upward. Who's there? As soon as Fang Hang landed, several guards immediately cast wary looks toward him. It's me. Fang Hang extended his hand and showed them the token of the Misty Island. The guards were surprised when they saw the token. Huh? What's going on? A token from Misty Island? How did this guy come back from the outside? I am Fang Bei, the newly advanced Great Sage. I ran into some trouble on my way here, and now I need to urgently visit the Creation Temple. The guards exchanged glances. A newly advanced Great Sage? And so young? Was this real? It seemed completely fake at first glance. But would anyone impersonate a Great Sage? The captain of the guard squad remained cautious and nodded, saying, Apologies, Great Sage, but currently, the Holy Realm is under martial law. We cannot verify your identity at this moment. Please return with us to the Temple of the Gods to meet with the three Great Sages. Fang Hang frowned slightly. If he followed them to the Temple of the Gods, that would be troublesome. The divine prank of the holy weapon was powerful, but it was still susceptible to perception attributes. As for whether he could avoid the surveillance of the three Great Sages, Fang Hang wasn't confident. Moreover, going to the Temple of the Gods again would be a waste of time, and there might be other unexpected twists along the way. Perhaps it would be better to break out directly? Fang Hang gradually relaxed his perception. The central God Pillar's guards were strictly arranged, with a checkpoint every 5 steps and a sentry every 10 steps. It was nearly impossible to avoid all of them. Just as he was hesitating whether to make a move, he suddenly saw a patrol team coming from the front. Commander Hain. Hain, leading his subordinate knights from the Night Legion, had been patrolling the west side of the King of God's Pillar. Upon hearing the familiar voice, he was startled and looked in that direction. Fang Bei? What a coincidence. Hain immediately showed a delighted expression, gesturing for his subordinates from the God's Punishment Night Legion to quickly approach Fang Hang. They all bowed in unison. Greetings, Great Sage. The guard team, which had been intercepting Fang Hang, immediately showed surprise. They exchanged astonished glances. What's going on? He was a Great Sage? So young? When did this happen? Since Commander Hain of the Legion had already bowed, the scouting team members of the Holy Realm looked at each other and also followed suit, bowing. Greetings, Great Sage. Rise. Fang Hang raised his hand to signal Hain and the others to stand up. He then looked at Hain and asked, Hain, what's the situation in the Holy Realm right now? We're not sure yet. According to the three Great Sages, the God King is in great trouble. A special power is attempting to seize the God King's body and gain the God King's strength. If they succeed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hain didn't know much, only sharing the information he had. Right now, the three Great Sages and the High Priests are gathered in the Temple of the Gods, releasing barrier strength to block the evil forces from affecting the God King. All the legions of the Holy Realm are also concentrated in the central God Pillar area, guarding each domain and preventing external intrusions. Fang Hang processed the information about the Holy Realm. It seemed that Suzu had somehow influenced the God King. However, the effect appeared to be even stronger than expected. From Hain's description, it seemed that Suzu even wanted to possess the God King's body, which had caused the entire Holy Realm to fall into a state of extreme alert. Suzu's main body had taken action, and the Holy Court might be cautious about launching an attack directly for fear of harming the God King. If Suzu and the God King were to perish together, the Holy Court would be at a disadvantage. Hain asked, Great Sage, I've heard that Fang Hang brought a large group of demons into the Holy Realm. How is the situation with the Mist God Pillar? How did you come here? Huh? Fang Hang? Fang Hang was surprised. So, he was already famous in the Holy Realm? He didn't know whether to be happy or sad about that. Fang Hang is one of the demonic seeds, extremely powerful, and he can control a summoned creature called the Licker, which has Legion-level combat ability. Recently, he even mastered dimensional strength, making him very difficult to deal with. If you encounter him, be extremely careful. I understand. Feng Heng steadied himself and continued, the Mist God Pillar has been taken over by the demonic seed. I received some information related to the God King's disturbances, so I came here immediately. Hain's heart stirred, and he asked, Great Sage, may I know exactly what happened? The monster that took over the God King's body may be related to the Creation Temple. Let's go, take me to the Creation Temple. Going to the Creation Temple again. Upon hearing this, the Holy Realm's guards exchanged looks, their faces showing some difficulty. Yes, Great Sage, I will take you there immediately. Hain didn't hesitate at all after hearing Feng Heng's words. He nodded to two of the guards behind him, signaling them to go back and report to the three Great Sages. Understood. Great Sage, the Creation Temple is located on the east side of the King of God's Pillar. Please follow me. Alright. Feng Heng briefly glanced at the two holy court guards returning to report, then followed Hain towards the Creation Temple. Creation Temple is where the God King comprehended holy power and broke through the limits of his power. After that, the Holy Court built the Creation Temple there. Halfway there, Hain introduced the situation of the Creation Temple to Feng Heng. Due to the powerful holy power fluctuations within the Creation Temple, the area around it was designated as a forbidden land for safety reasons. Very few people enter the area normally. In the past several 100,000 years, the Creation Temple has gradually become a trial ground in the Holy Realm. Many have tried to enter the Creation Temple to cultivate, seeking the power of the Great Sages. Feng Heng was curious and asked, You mean a trial? Yes, I've heard some rumors, though I'm not sure how true they are. Great Sage, consider it just a story. Hain, not wanting to mislead Feng Heng, first prepared a disclaimer before continuing. It's said that the original 12 sages passed the trial of the Creation Temple under the guidance of the God King, becoming the Great Sages. Later on, those who mastered the sacred power could also enter the Creation Temple, cultivate there, and refine themselves until they ascended to become true Great Sages. But this trial is extremely long and has a very low success rate. It's very dangerous, so most people wouldn't attempt it. 20 minutes later, Hain led Feng Heng to the square outside the Creation Temple. From the square, the Creation Temple, built against a mountain, appeared somewhat worn down. Faint golden light continually spilled from the windows of the temple. Chapter 2786, God-given orb. I remember you said before that the God-given orb was inside the Creation Temple? What is its relationship with the Creation Temple? The God-given orb is the source of the entire Creation Temple. All the power of the Creation Temple comes from the orb. I once heard Great Sage Gloesos mention that the God-given orb is also an important item for constructing the entire Holy Realm. Feng Heng nodded lightly while listening. An important item for constructing the Holy Realm. This thing was very likely the Holy Realm orb. Feng Heng glanced outside the temple and asked, Aren't there any other people guarding this place? Aren't you worried about a demon invasion? Only the guards are stationed around the square's perimeter. Hain continued to explain, Great Sage, you may not know, but the Creation Temple is more dangerous than the outside world. The holy power fluctuations inside are terrifying. Even high-tier demons entering this place would perish from the burning of the holy power. So it's quite normal that the Holy Court hasn't wasted its strength guarding here. Feng Heng squinted his eyes. I understand now, Hain. Stay outside. I'll go in and take a look. Yes. Hain stood in place, watching Feng Heng walk into the Creation Temple with the members of the God's Punishment Night Legion. As the exclusive God's Punishment Night Legion under the Great Sage, Hain's mindset was clear. Everything was centered around the Great Sage. Inside the Creation Temple. The temple had a tower-like structure, with a staircase on the right side leading upward along the wall. The scorching divine holy light beams poured down from above. Feng Heng squinted slightly, unable to keep his eyes open due to the blinding light. In a sacred study state, the feeling of being bathed in holy light should have been gentle. But here, it was not the case. Feng Heng looked around the great hall and then raised his head to gaze upward. The ceiling had a semi-hollow structure, with the divine holy light pouring down from the upper level. Many members of the Holy Court were sitting cross-legged on the ground, bathing in the divine holy light, their eyes closed in concentration, with sweat covering their foreheads. It seemed they were cultivating. Feng Heng closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. This scorching divine power. It was completely different from the orb power he had seen in the Abyss of Despair. Feng Heng had previously learned that the entire Creation Temple Tower was divided into 5 levels. The God-given orb was on the top floor, the 5th basement. Let's go up and take a look. Feng Heng's gaze shifted toward the staircase on the right leading to the upper levels. He began walking up the stairs slowly. The higher he went, the greater the pressure of the divine power he felt on his body. On the first 3 floors, Feng Heng could see scattered holy court cultivators sitting on the ground. As he ascended, the number of cultivators decreased. On the 3rd floor, there were only 3 cultivators meditating. One of the holy court cultivators suddenly opened his eyes, seeing someone heading toward the 4th floor. A look of surprise appeared in his eyes. Who was that? Continuing up, the 4th floor was ahead. They had already exhausted all their strength staying here. How could someone still continue upwards? Feng Heng gritted his teeth, enduring the discomfort spreading throughout his body, step by step, as he ascended to the 4th floor of the Creation Temple. The divine holy light beams no longer felt gentle on his body, but instead, they burned like scalding heat. He could still hold on. Feng Heng took a deep breath and scanned the 4th floor of the temple. There were no cultivators to be seen on the 4th floor. He headed toward the staircase that led to the 5th floor. Just like the Death Realm orb he had encountered in the Abyss of Despair. The closer he got to the orb, the more he could feel the immense power fluctuation emanating from it. But unlike the Death Realm, Feng Heng could sense that a large portion of the Creation Temple's orb's power was restrained. A shield. There was most likely a protective shield around the Holy Realm orb. At this moment, the cells of Suzu, which were mixed within Feng Heng's body, were also being stimulated by the God-given orb. A sharp twisting struggle occurred in his right arm. CHHH. 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 Suzu's face gradually appeared on Feng Heng's right arm. Perhaps due to the intense pain, her face looked somewhat contorted. Feng Heng. What are you doing? Where is this place? Feng Heng struggled to resist the power from the God-given orb, exerting a great amount of effort. He clenched his teeth and didn't respond. Don't waste time here, go destroy the Starry Temple. Shut up. Don't disturb me. Feng Heng snapped, taking another step forward, and climbing another tier of stairs. Ho! Under the influence of the divine holy light, Suzu's face became even more twisted with pain, as if she could no longer resist the burning power of the holy light. She retreated into Feng Heng's arm. Each step Feng Heng took cost him immense strength, beads of sweat rolling down his cheeks. He tilted his head back once more. Unknowingly, Feng Heng had reached the highest 5th floor. He had found it. The God-given orb. It was a one. A barely perceptible smile appeared on Feng Heng's face. Unlike the Death Realm orb he saw in the Abyss of Despair, the orb in the Holy Realm was a dark golden orb. There was no altar set up like in the Abyss of Despair, it simply floated in midair in the center of the 5th floor of the temple. Most importantly, there was a protective net surrounding the God-given orb. Hint: the player's current Great Sage bloodline has not been upgraded to high tier, level, max. The player cannot receive information hints or mission details. Hint: the player has not triggered the prerequisite mission. Unable to perceive energy, Feng Heng quickly scanned the game hints that appeared on his retina. Compared to the Abyss of Despair, perhaps because of the additional protective net around the orb, most of the orb's power had been restricted. He stopped about 50 meters away from the God-given orb. Only 50 meters left. As he moved forward, the pressure on his body increased dramatically with each step. At this rate, he could only push forward for about another 30 meters at most. This would be the limit. It was much better than in the Abyss of Despair, but the last 30 meters felt like an insurmountable chasm. So what should he do next? Feng Heng stared at the dark golden orb ahead, his brain working quickly. Previously, he had tried countless methods to gain control over the Abyss of Despair orb, but they had all failed without exception. At that time, he was still several hundred meters away from the orb. But now, the distance was reduced to only 30 meters. Still ineffective. Mental strength, power of faith, psychic strength, vampire strength. Feng Heng tried them all, but none of these methods had any effect on the orb. No good, the ripple is too strong. Unable to withstand it, Feng Heng slowly backed up until he was at the edge of the 5th floor of the Creation Temple. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes again, and carefully recalled the images he had seen by the Nether River. A clue. There must be a clue. Feng Heng firmly etched the images from the illusion in his memory, pulling them out frame by frame to carefully search for any hints. The protective net? Feng Heng suddenly realized that when the founder in the illusion had been controlling the orb, the dark golden net surrounding the orb had undergone a subtle change in color. And at the same time, a strange and unusual mark appeared on the orb. Chapter 2787, Protective Net Rune. Feng Heng instantly realized the key to the problem. That's right. The rune had appeared as a result of the protective net's influence. Feng Heng felt like he had found the breakthrough, his excitement growing. Previously, he had tried various methods to influence the orb, but most of his efforts couldn't even penetrate the external power field surrounding the orb. Even if some force did penetrate and reach the orb, it had no effect. So the target had been wrong. The real control didn't need to be applied to the orb itself, but rather to the protective shield around it. The creator had used the external metallic layer and special imprint to manipulate the orb. It had to be this way. Feng Heng calmed himself down, closing his eyes once more as he searched his memories, focusing on the inscriptions he had seen on the orb in the illusion during his time in the Holy Realm. He committed every detail of the inscription to memory. Whoosh! Feng Heng opened his eyes again. He had remembered. It was time to try. There was at least a 50% chance of success. Feng Heng's eyes lit up with a sharp gleam as he took a deep breath. Despite the burning sensation from the holy power, he pushed through the pain and walked forward, slowly extending his hand toward the orb. He gathered all his mental strength. It seemed as though the orb and its protective shield remained exactly where they were, with no visible reaction. But Feng Heng felt a surge of joy in his heart. He could sense it. When he had attempted to manipulate the orb and protective net using his psychic power, there had indeed been a response. It wasn't a complete lack of reaction, it was the presence of a counteracting force. The sacred power could influence the protective shield. Without hesitation, Feng Heng pushed the sacred power to its limit. The Book of Oaths levitated in front of him. Holy power gathered in tiny, glittering points. As the holy power passed through the protective layer, a dark glow slowly emerged at the center of the god-given orb. A faint and hidden rune imprint appeared, shimmering and out of visibility. It wasn't enough. There was still a long way to go. Compared to the already god-level necromancy, Feng Heng's sacred study level was simply insufficient. Even though his mental strength was abundant, he still couldn't get the orb to move. What to do? Suddenly, Feng Heng had an idea. In that instant, he thought of Suzu. The power of faith. Wasn't Suzu always shouting about finding ways to weaken the Holy Court's power of faith? Maybe he could use the power of faith. In theory, if there was enough power of faith and it was consumed recklessly without considering the cost, it could elevate personal strength hundreds or even thousands of times in a very short period. The Holy Court in the Holy Realm had been able to resist Suzu up until now solely due to the power of faith accumulated over tens of thousands of years within the central god pillar. If he could somehow temporarily borrow the Holy Court's power of faith. Feng Heng's eyes narrowed. The power of faith should be stored in the Starry Temple. Go to the Starry Temple. Now was the best time for him to act. Without further hesitation, Feng Heng began to slowly retreat, heading back the same way he came, walking toward the direction of the Creation Temple's outer perimeter. Along the way, the trial participants who were cultivating inside the Creation Temple cast strange glances at Feng Heng. This was strange. What was going on with this guy? He rushed in here, his strength terrifying, even reaching the upper levels. But after that, he didn't seem to be cultivating at all, and now he's hurrying out again. Outside the Creation Temple, in the square, Army Commander Hain and the members of the God's Punishment Night Legion stood quietly, waiting. Great Sage. When they saw Feng Heng walk out of the Creation Temple, the knights immediately bowed in respect. No need for such formalities, Feng Heng waved his hand, hastily descending the steps outside the Creation Temple. Let's go. Take me to the Starry Temple immediately. Noticing Feng Heng's urgency, Hain quickly led the way and cautiously asked, Great Sage, is something wrong? Yes, I need to borrow the power of faith from the Starry Temple. Hain's eyes narrowed in thought. Great Sage, right now the Holy Realm is facing a crisis. The other 3 great sages are guarding the Starry Temple closely. They may not be willing to easily lend us the power of faith. Even so, we must try. I need enough power of faith to assist the God King in dealing with the demons. The Starry Temple is the only place that can provide a large amount of faith power in such a short time. I understand. Hain didn't question Feng Heng's reasoning. He quickened his pace and led him toward the Starry Temple. Coincidentally, the Starry Temple was also located on the eastern side of the central god pillar, not too far from the Creation Temple. After about 10 minutes, Hain and Feng Heng arrived at the square outside the Starry Temple. A large number of Holy Court guards were stationed around the perimeter of the square. Upon seeing the God's Punishment Night Legion approaching swiftly, the guards' faces grew solemn. The commander of the Starry Temple Guards, Moreno, stepped forward from the crowd, his gaze falling on Hain, the army commander. Hain was well known in the Holy Realm. Moreno naturally recognized him, but he found it strange. Hain had always been stationed at the demon-suppressing temple on the sub-god pillar, rarely leaving. Why was he suddenly bringing a group here? Hain stepped forward and stopped in front of the Starry Temple's guards. Moreno, this is Feng Bei, the newly appointed Great Sage. The situation is urgent, and we need to enter the Starry Temple immediately. The guards glanced at Feng Heng. They had just heard about the new Great Sage, but they hadn't expected him to be so young. With the status of a Great Sage, no one would stop him from entering the Starry Temple. I hadn't heard of any great sage coming to the temple, Moreno said, his voice calm. Moreno and Hain were both from the Holy Court's Holy Paladin faction, so if they could make things easier, they wouldn't make it difficult. Moreno's gaze lingered on Feng Heng for a moment, then he signaled the guards to step aside and motioned with his hand, "It seems you have important business. Please, go ahead." As Hain passed by, Moreno quietly reminded him, "The Starry Temple is currently guarded by High Priestess Stella and her fellow High Priestesses." "Thank you," Hain nodded. There was some tension between the priestly and commanding factions, but it wasn't open conflict, just occasional minor obstacles. Moreno's reminder was meant to be cautious. But with the entire Holy Realm facing a crisis, it was unlikely that the priests would make any trouble at this time. Feng Heng didn't know about the underlying tensions. Worried that Suzu might not be able to hold off the Holy Court forces, he hurriedly followed Hain and the knights into the Starry Temple, preparing to obtain the Holy Realm orb as quickly as possible. Inside the Starry Temple, billions of stars swirled around. Feng Heng gazed at the scene, awe and shock flickering in his eyes. Each of the flowing sacred stars contained immense power of faith. The Holy Court had accumulated faith in the Holy Realm for years, and their power was evident. High Priestess Stella and the other 4 priests sat in the center of the Great Hall, maintaining the temple's operations. Around the walls of the hall, elite priests assisted them in their work. "Greetings, High Priestess Stella." Hain stopped outside the swirling field of faith stars and nodded toward the High Priestesses. "This is Feng Bei, the newly appointed Great Sage." Chapter 2788, Scepter. Stella and several High Priestesses opened their eyes, all casting a scrutinizing glance at Feng Heng. "So it's Feng Bei," Stella remarked softly. "I had heard about this earlier, but I didn't expect the newly appointed High Priest to be so young." She continued, "You're in such a hurry to come to my Starry Temple. Is it for the God-given scepter? Though the process has been rushed, given the urgency of the situation, there's no harm in handing you the God-given scepter now." "Huh? The God-given scepter? What in the world was that?" Feng Heng was a bit stunned upon hearing this. Stella had misunderstood Feng Heng's intentions and lightly nodded to the priests standing beside her. The 4 priests gathered together and condensed a mark in front of them. As the mark gathered and activated, the faith-infused starry sky within the Starry Temple began to gently swirl. 7 scepters slowly descended from the high ceiling of the temple, circling the central area where Stella and the others stood. The God-given scepter was personally forged by the God King, with 12 scepters in total, each corresponding to one of the 12 sages. When a former great sage passes away, the God-given scepter automatically returns to Starry Temple, Stella explained. "If you are the successor to the great sage, then you naturally possess the ability to be recognized by the God-given scepter and successfully control it." Stella opened her eyes again and looked at Feng Heng with an examining gaze. If he couldn't. This meant Feng Heng's identity was in question. Feng Heng shifted his gaze towards the 7 floating scepters in the air, silently musing. "So, this is how it is. Just like the Death God, the Great Sage also has a corresponding weapon." Hain also looked at Feng Heng, feeling a hidden surge of excitement within him. He had no doubts about Feng Heng's identity. As long as Feng Heng truly was the inheritor of the Great Sage Cloesos, the leader of the God's Punishment Knight Legion, the scepter he was meant to wield should be the one left behind by the Great Sage Cloesos after his death. Feng Heng tilted his head, sensing the power emanating from the God-given scepter. He tried extending his hand towards the 7 scepters. Whoosh! One of the scepters floating in the air was immediately influenced by Feng Heng's mental strength, emitting a faint hum in midair. Feng Heng's mental strength triggered it. The God-given scepter instantly flew toward Feng Heng's hand, which he tightly grasped in his palm. He had done it. Hain's gaze was locked on Feng Heng. He was far more excited than Feng Heng himself. There was no doubt about it. He saw it clearly, the scepter in Feng Heng's hand was the God's Punishment Scepter. It was the weapon once wielded by the Great Sage Cloesos. Standing nearby, Feng Heng felt the strength continually overflowing from the God-given scepter in his hand, as game prompts simultaneously appeared on his retinas. Hint: the player has obtained an item, God-given scepter, God's Punishment, item, God-given scepter. Tier: demigod level. Description: forged by the God King for the first generation 12 sages, this God-given scepter possesses immense holy power. Once bound, it adds 10 to all attributes and grants an additional 50 points in spirit, will, and physique. Additional skill: Holy Faith of God. Skill description: the player's currently bound Temple of Zeus has a 100% faith conversion rate. The scepter can temporarily store the power of faith, with a 100x increase in faith storage and an additional 10% increase in faith usage efficiency. Additional skill: Crushing Strike. Skill description: consumed all energy of the current holy shield and dealt an equivalent amount of damage to the target unit. After using this skill, The player could not regain Holy Shield for 600 seconds. This skill benefited from the effects of mental strength and sacred study, with the damage being increased up to 3 times. Feng Heng observed the game prompt, his pupils suddenly shrinking. A demigod-level scepter. The additional storage of 100 times the power of faith and the 10% increase in faith usage efficiency was exactly what he urgently needed. A perfect addition. Furthermore, the crushing strike active skill was truly a divine skill. The Great Sage's passive shield energy was up to 3 times the player's health points. This meant that one strike could deal damage equal to 3 times the player's health points. With the addition of the sacred study and the enhancement of mental strength, it could deal up to 9 times the maximum HP as damage, a maximum of 9 times the damage. And considering the high base strength, his HP was quite substantial. A rare active damage dealing skill. Feng Heng carefully reviewed the skill description, nodding in his heart, before raising his head and looking at the priestess. Thank you, High Priestess. No need to thank me. Since you are the inheritor of the Great Sage, these are all rightfully yours. I hope you can make good use of this power, Stella replied, nodding gently at Feng Heng. At the moment, the 3 Great Sages are in the Temple of the Gods, dealing with monsters. They need your help, so hurry back and report. High Priestess Stella. Feng Heng showed no intention of leaving. He stood his ground, cupping his hands once more. I wish to borrow some of the power of faith. Borrow? Stella furrowed her brows, her eyes now filled with more confusion as she looked at Feng Heng. Is this something the 3 Great Sages instructed? I haven't received any orders. The situation is urgent. I haven't had time to report this to the Great Sages yet, Feng Heng explained slowly, raising the God-given scepter in his hand with a serious expression. High Priestess, you should be aware that the Holy Realm is facing a crisis, and the God King is in danger. There's no time to delay applying for it. I need to borrow some of the power of faith right now. Upon hearing this, Stella's frown deepened. Feng Bei had come here to demand the God-given scepter, and she instinctively assumed this matter had been authorized by the 3 Great Sages. Seeing Stella hesitate, Hain stepped forward and asked, High Priestess, although Feng Bei hasn't yet ascended to the 12 Sages, he is still a Great Sage himself. Why does he need the approval of the other Great Sages? These are special times. Eliminating the monsters controlling the God King requires a large amount of faith power. Not long ago, the 3 Great Sages repeatedly ordered that we must protect the faith power. Stella, unwilling to offend the newly ascended Great Sage, gestured for her subordinate priests to immediately report to the Temple of the Gods. Please wait a moment. We'll have news soon. No, High Priestess Stella, you don't understand. There's no time to waste. Now, I, as a Great Sage, command you to cooperate with me in extracting the power of faith. Feng Heng said as he raised the scepter high. Within the starry temple, the shining faith stars slowly began to flow in response to the scepter Feng Heng held aloft. Feng Heng activated his mental strength. The tiny faith star sparks began gathering toward him. But in the next moment, the faith power reversed and returned, once again enveloping the starry temple's starry sky. Stella, along with the other 4 priests, worked together to stabilize the faith stars. Sorry, Great Sage, I am responsible for the entire starry temple. Once the message from the Temple of the Gods arrives, I will immediately cooperate with you to obtain the power of faith. Feng Heng snorted coldly in his heart. Wait for news? Wait for what? The God King and Ouroboros were fighting fiercely right now, and the 3 Great Sages in the Temple of the Gods were unlikely to lend him the power of faith. This was his best chance. He decided to take matters into his own hands. Humphrey. Since you won't give it to me, I'll just take it myself. Chapter 2789, Borrowing Whoosh. The magic array reflected in Feng Heng's right pupil spun rapidly. Stella and several high priestesses controlling the magic array's power changed their expressions slightly. The faith stars within the entire starry temple slowly lost control as the magic array spun. Feng Bei. Stop. Do you know what you're doing? Stella injected all her mental strength, trying with all her might to stabilize the magic array. But it was impossible. A layer of cold sweat formed on Stella's forehead. What exactly was he trying to do? Inside the starry temple, golden orbs of light condensed into faith light spots, quickly gathering toward Feng Heng. Feng Heng raised a God-given scepter high in his hand. Stella, my apologies. The situation is urgent. After it's over, I will give you an explanation. Stella gritted her teeth, saying nothing as she exerted all her energy to control the magic ray. However, with just their strength, they couldn't stop the faith energy from slowly floating toward Feng Heng. Stop him. Don't let him take the power of faith. Priests in the Great Hall gathered around Feng Heng. Humphrey. Hain let out a cold hum, and his team immediately spread out around Feng Heng to guard him, while another group firmly held the entrance to the Temple of Faith. Stella, openly defying the great sage's orders, and now you're dragging everyone else along with you. Do you intend to make a move on the great sage? Anyone who dares to take another step forward, I will pursue this matter to the end. The priest's expressions changed slightly. He was right. No matter what, Fang Bei was still the great sage, their boss's boss. If they made a move now, what would they do when it came time for reckoning? Moreover, they didn't even know what was going on. How could their boss and the boss's boss suddenly be at odds? It was all unclear. The priests in the temple hesitated, not daring to strike, but unable to retreat, and thus stood awkwardly at a standstill. As for the holy paladin guards outside the temple's square, they had no idea what was happening inside and continued to guard the entrance to prevent external intrusion. Stella stared firmly at Fang Heng, sweat continuously sliding down both sides of her face. Fang Bei's mental strength was terrifying, and he was extremely familiar with the alchemy magic array's workings. He didn't seem like a newly appointed great sage at all. Even with the combined strength of all 5 of them, they couldn't control the flow of the faith universe. The faith orbs in the starry temple slowly gathered toward Fang Heng's hand. Whoosh! The first faith orb drew closer to Fang Heng, and as it made contact with the God-given scepter, it was immediately absorbed by the scepter. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. Current faith storage, 1 million. Fang Heng's mind stirred. Good grief. The Holy Court's reserves were much more abundant than he had imagined. Just one faith orb contained 1 million units of faith energy. At this moment, the faith stars in the starry temple were glowing brightly, and there were at least several 100,000 faith orbs in total. Absorb. Fang Heng once again activated his mental strength. Absorb at full force. The amount of faith energy a player could store was linked to their mental strength and their sacred study talent. Fang Heng's mental strength was already impressive, and his sacred study talent was terrifying. Almost all of it had been maxed out. Additionally, the God-given scepter could store 100 times more faith energy than normal. Instantly, the faith orbs in the starry temple flew toward Fang Heng's scepter. The game hints were flashing frantically on his retina. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. The player gains 1 million faith. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. The God-given scepter's faith storage has reached its maximum. In just a short moment, the God-given scepter was filled with faith energy. Hint: the player can continue charging. Any extra energy gained will continue to increase. Hint: in an overload state, the player can temporarily store extra faith. The overload faith will gradually dissipate according to a set ratio. Hint: in an overload state, the player will suffer from continuous HP loss. Overload? Could it continue? Fang Heng's eyelids twitched slightly. Fine. Let's keep going. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. The player gains 1 million faith. Hint: the player takes 21,000 damage. Hint: the player uses God-given scepter skill to absorb faith. Stella and the 4 priests were even more shocked at the sight. They watched in astonishment as countless faith orbs kept flying towards Fang Heng, absorbed by the God-given scepter in his hand. At first, they thought Fang Heng would only absorb a small portion of the faith, but it quickly became clear that the amount of faith energy he needed far exceeded their expectations. Fang Bei showed no sign of stopping. So much faith energy? What was Fang Bei planning to do? Was he not afraid of exploding from it? In just under a minute, 2/3 of the faith energy within the starry temple had been absorbed. This was the accumulated faith energy of the entire holy realm for thousands of years. Phew. Fang Heng slowly lowered his hand, took a deep breath, and swept his gaze around the temple. At this point, a faint halo of faith energy surrounded him, spilling out from the excess faith energy that had been absorbed. Fang Heng could clearly feel that the excess faith power, far beyond the limit, was slowly dissipating with time, and his control over it had significantly weakened. As for the negative effect, his HP was continuously dropping, suffering 200,000 damage per second. With the undying effect, this damage was insufficient to kill him. Time to focus on the main task. Hein, let's go. Fang Heng gritted his teeth and endured the discomfort, turning around and leaving the starry temple, retracing his steps. Yes. Hein responded, raising his hand, and led the God's Punishment Night Legion as they followed Fang Heng out. The starry temple fell silent for a moment. Stella and her fellow high priests looked as though they had been through a great battle, their backs drenched in sweat. Even with all 5 of their combined strength, they couldn't stop Fang Heng. The remaining faith power in the starry temple was now negligible. Stella gritted her teeth, holding herself up, and gave her orders: send someone to follow Fang Bei and track his movements, and immediately call for help from the 3 great sages of the temples of the gods. Understood. Meanwhile, in the temples of the gods. Report. The holy court guards rushed in, delivering the report. Army Commander Hain urgently reports that the newly appointed Great Sage Fang Bei entered the central god pillar not long ago. The Great Sage Aladdin slowly opened his eyes, pausing the flow of energy into the holy barrier, and asked, "Did they bring him?" "No." Great Sage Fang Bei discovered some clues related to the demonic invasion and, under the leadership of Commander Hain, headed towards the Creation Temple. At the mention of the Creation Temple, the others in the room exchanged puzzled looks. What did this mean? In this critical situation, why wasn't Fang Heng coming straight to them? Why was he heading to the Creation Temple instead? 2790, interception. It's fine, let him go. Aladdin couldn't figure it out, so he didn't dwell on it any longer. At this point, the God King had gradually gained the upper hand, and they just needed to ensure everything continued running smoothly. As for Fang Bei, that could be set aside for now. Understood. The guard cupped his hands and withdrew. Only 2 minutes after he left, another guard hurriedly arrived. Report, Great Sage. Aladdin, the Great Sage, opened his eyes again and nodded. Speak. The guard, drenched in cold sweat, looked toward the Great Sage and reported, "There's an anomaly in the Holy Realm." Fang Bei. Fang Bei, he just entered the Starry Temple and obtained the Scepter of the Gods within the Starry Temple, and... At this, the two other Great Sages beside Aladdin also opened their eyes, feeling confused. The God-given scepter consisted of 12 in total, personally crafted by the God King, corresponding to the 12 sages. Why did Fang Bei suddenly rush over there? In such a hurry? Dean asked, "Spit it out." "What else?" "Hurry." The guard's face turned pale, and his voice even trembled as he continued. Fang Bei used the scepter to absorb a large amount of the power of faith from within the Starry Temple, and now, less than 1/10 of the power remains in the Starry Temple. This was bad. Hearing this, all three Great Sages turned pale in shock. 1/10 of the power of faith was far from enough to sustain them and Suzu? Are you sure? I was there at the scene, I saw it with my own eyes. It was High Priestess Stella who sent me here urgently to report, the guard replied, still trembling slightly. The three Great Sages exchanged looks with one another. What exactly was happening? What's going on with Fang Bei? Doesn't he know how important the power of faith is to the God King? One of them exclaimed. Everyone, please remain calm. Aladdin gestured for them to settle down. We cannot panic right now. Since Fang Bei can control the scepter, it means his status as a Great Sage is unquestionable. The situation might not be as bad as they thought. Perhaps something even more urgent happened, and Fang Bei didn't have time to consult with them. They absolutely must not lose composure. Aladdin, still managing to stay calm, steadied himself and looked at the guard. Did Fang Bei say anything when he was absorbing the power of faith? The guard carefully recalled and responded. He seemed to say that the power of faith was needed and that it was urgent. Dean pressed, what happened after that? Where did Fang Bei go? Ah, right, I heard them say that they were heading back to the Creation Temple. Orkney stepped forward, saying, Great Sages, I have been cultivating in the Creation Temple recently and know it well. The situation is urgent. Please allow me to take people and head to the Creation Temple to find Fang Bei. Dean, now growing anxious, shouted, what are you waiting for? Go. Immediately take people there. No matter what, stop him. Return the scepter to the Starry Temple in full. Do you understand? Understood. Orkney answered, then turned to gather his team. After walking a few steps forward, he stopped and turned back. Sir, what if Fang Bei doesn't cooperate? Doesn't cooperate? What does he think he's doing? Dean, enraged, shouted, I permit you to use any means necessary. Bring him back, even if you have to force him. Understood? Orkney nodded gravely, yes, Great Sage. Understood. Meanwhile, Hain was escorting Fang Heng, heading back to the Creation Temple. Part away there, Fang Heng suddenly stopped in his tracks. Hain noticed Fang Heng's sudden change in demeanor and asked, Great Sage? What's wrong? Fang Heng responded, just give me 2 minutes here. Hain nodded and replied, understood. Fang Heng walked to a secluded corner, ensuring no one was around. He quickly rolled up his sleeve and tightly gripped his right arm with his left hand. Kai. His right hand twisted rapidly, and soon, a distorted face began to form. Fang Heng. The voice was clearly hoarse, a result of the earlier influence of the Holy Orb's power. Why haven't you gone to the Starry Temple yet? You'd better give me some good news. Suzu, listen carefully. I've already been to the Starry Temple once. The power of faith inside the temple has already been extracted by me. There's only about 1/10 of it left. This is your best opportunity. I've done everything I can for you. Now, remove the effects you've placed on me. Really? Suzu's previously anxious face showed a hint of change, before she said, no rush. I'll verify what you're saying. As she spoke, The twisted face quickly withdrew from Fang Heng's shoulder. Hey! Fang Heng smirked. Once the Temple of the Gods in the Holy Realm learned that he'd absorbed the power of faith, they were likely to pursue him. This could jeopardize his chances of taking the orb's protective shield. Let Suzu deal with them. Fang Heng adjusted his sleeve and walked back toward Hane and the Knight Commander. All done. Let's continue. Yes. Hane had just instructed his subordinate team to prepare for departure when he suddenly heard a loud boom, followed by intense shaking beneath his feet. For a moment, he almost lost his balance. Boom. Fang Heng and the God's Punishment Knight Legion turned toward the direction of the explosion sound, their eyes immediately showing a hint of surprise. A pillar of divine holy light shot into the sky, intertwining with another dark red pillar of light, piercing through the heavens. Half of the sky was bathed in golden divine holy light, while the other half was stained red. The two powerful forces were clashing head-on, and even from where they stood, they could feel an immense shockwave. Hane, the knight, was alarmed upon seeing this. The Temple of the Gods. That direction was the Temple of the Gods. The enemy's power was so terrifying. No wonder even the three great sages were being so cautious. Suzu? Fang Heng mumbled to himself softly. Good grief. Playing such a big game? As he was thinking, a series of game prompts appeared on his retina. 11:01, hint, the player is currently in the Holy Court faction. The player has triggered an optional mission, Crisis in the Holy Realm. Suzu was also a powerhouse in her own right. As he was thinking, a series of game prompts appeared on his retina. Hint, the player is currently in the Holy Court faction. The player has triggered an optional mission, Crisis in the Holy Realm. Mission name, Crisis in the Holy Realm. Mission difficulty, SSS. Mission description, the Holy Realm is facing an unknown crisis. Please go to the Temple of the Gods to protect the God King and eliminate Boon and Cultivator Suzu. Mission requirements, ensure the survival of the God King, 1 out of 1, eliminate Boon, 0 out of 1, and eliminate Suzu, 0 out of 1. Mission rewards, unknown. Fang Heng quickly scanned the game prompt. Under the effects of the holy weapon, Divine Prank, he was now in the Holy Court faction, so he had triggered a faction mission. Alright then. Since there was no failure penalty for the mission, he decided to put it aside for now. First, he needed to find a way to deal with the orb shield, that was the main priority. Hane, it seems that the Temple of the Gods is already facing a crisis. We need to move faster and help the God King resolve the trouble completely. Yes. Hane, the army commander, waved his hand, signaling the team to follow, and led Fang Heng toward the Creation Temple. Chapter 2791, Control the Sub-God Pillar. Wu Yan and the group of demonic seeds also saw two beams of light rising from the direction of the King of God's pillar. Such a powerful energy fluctuation. The demonic seeds were secretly alarmed. In addition to the holy power fluctuations from the Holy Realm, there was another force that was equally formidable, counteracting it. Suzu? Old Black's eyes also carried a hint of caution as he glanced into the distance and called out, "Hurry up! Don't just stand there. Time is running out. Quickly, take the remaining materials back to the Mist Temple." Nearby, Ginger and the 11 demonic seeds gathered, clearly divided into two groups from Baimu and his team. Ahem. Baimu coughed lightly and said, "Everyone, it's about time. The Godwing tribe has prepared the teleportation passage for us." Everyone turned to look at Ginger. Ginger then looked at Jiziobo. Jiziobo said, "Bosses, the potions in your hands were concocted by our prison researchers. After drinking the potion, the mutant worm body inside you will be expelled. Of course, even after being expelled, it is still extremely dangerous." Jiziobo took a few steps back. In any case, it's best to prepare in advance. The potion was created by Kaiyu Yukang. Our Ouroboros was a type of symbiotic virus. Kaiyu Yukang had previously created similar anti-parasitic potions, and with the blood extracted from Fang Heng, the potion was quickly developed and confirmed to be effective in driving out the parasites. Alright, let's begin. Ginger nodded, took out the blue potion, and drank it directly. Outside the Creation Temple, the guards in the plaza were still astonished by the two spiraling pillars of light that had appeared in the sky, one on the left and one on the right. The knights led by Knight Commander Hane, who had hurried over, were not hindered in the slightest, and they all bowed in salute. Fang Heng arrived at the entrance of the Creation Temple, turned around, and said, "Hane, this is a critical moment. You must stay here and make sure no one enters and interrupts me." Knight Commander Hane's expression turned serious as he said in a deep voice, "Understood." Fang Heng nodded, then turned and entered the Creation Temple. Inside the temple, the trial participants on the first floor saw Fang Heng enter once again. What was he doing here? This was strange. Why was he back again? Unlike last time, Fang Heng was now enveloped in a faint, Divine Holy Light. He had absorbed too much of the power of faith and could no longer control it, and it was leaking out uncontrollably. The power of faith leaking from within and the suppression from the Holy Realm orb outside were creating immense pressure on Feng Heng. Feng Heng gritted his teeth, enduring the discomfort. He made his way up the stairs to the 5th floor, standing 50 meters in front of the Holy Realm orb. Slowly, he raised his hand. Whoosh! With the activation of his mental strength, a faint golden glow appeared around the golden mesh on the orb. At the same time, a weak rune mark appeared on the orb. Very good. Power of faith. Activate. Feng Heng sensed the power of faith flowing through the God-given scepter in his hand, merging with the divine mental strength he released, combining into a single force. In almost an instant, the holy power increased by several hundred times. Whoosh! The rune mark on the orb gradually blossomed, emitting a soft divine holy light. Effective. Feng Heng's heart surged with joy. Continue. The power of faith stored in the God-given scepter was rapidly activated and consumed in a frenzy. The dark golden protective net outside the orb, under Feng Heng's mental manipulation, lifted the orb slowly, and the energy waves released further weakened the orb's power. Success. The orb slowly levitated in midair. Good. Next. Slowly, slowly. Feng Heng held his breath, condensing his divine power and focusing his attention, trying to manipulate the protective net of the orb to complete the imprint link. Time passed, second by second. 10 minutes later. Feng Heng suddenly opened his eyes. Almost simultaneously, the imprint on the orb gleamed brightly. Done. His mental strength had completed a simple spiritual link with the imprint on the orb. Next, he could temporarily control the orb's movement with the ability of the protective net and the imprint. Additionally, with just a thought, the protective net outside the orb could detach from the orb and retreat, returning to the death realm. Of course, Feng Heng had also considered directly taking the orb. But doing so would likely provoke a backlash from the Holy Realm. Currently, controlling the orb had drained all of his strength, leaving him unable to deal with the people from the Holy Court. Moreover, such a move was incredibly dangerous, with almost no chance of success. However, Feng Heng's eyes narrowed slightly. He had come this far. To leave now would be a waste and far too passive. After establishing the mental link with the orb, Feng Heng could clearly sense its immense power. No matter who Suza was, what her relationship with Zai was, or what she had left on him. Dare to threaten him? Not even willing to give him a mission? Just making him work for nothing? It was simply laughable. Compared to this, the Holy Court was much more reliable. At least they gave him a clear mission and rewards. Since that was the case, why not take a little more while he was at it? The orb slowly approached Feng Heng's body, stopping just under half a meter away. After the mental link was completed, the power released by the orb caused minimal damage to Feng Heng's main body. However, the hidden presence of Suza within his body couldn't resist. Feng Heng's right arm muscles squirmed and struggled, and Suza's face reappeared on his arm, showing a terrifying, distorted expression. "What are you doing, Feng Heng?" "Ah." With a pitiful scream, the human face slowly crumbled, and a crack appeared on Feng Heng's arm. Tiny worm-like bodies burst out from the rift. Kai. As soon as the small worm bodies emerged from his arm, they were instantly engulfed by the divine fire from the holy orb, burning them to ashes under the orb's powerful holy energy. Done. Feng Heng murmured to himself. The power of the holy orb was much stronger than he had expected. It even surpassed the strength of an ordinary holy weapon. But there was a prerequisite for all of this. The power of faith. Only with the huge consumption of faith could he roughly control the orb's power. Feng Heng glanced at the remaining power of faith. There was still enough. One more go. Outside the Creation Temple, Orkney arrived with a group of elite Holy Court knights in the square. On the way, Orkney saw two beams of light rising from the temple of the god's area, making him feel even more uneasy. This was bad. It seemed that Suza had already launched her final attack on the God King. He even suspected that the newly promoted Great Sage had something to do with it. He had never heard any news about the Great Sage's successor before, and now, at a time when the Holy Realm was in trouble, the so-called Great Sage appeared. Moreover, Feng Bei had just taken the power of faith from the Starry Temple, and right after that, Zisuyu had teamed up with Boon to launch a final assault on the God King, attempting to seize the God King's will. It all seemed too well planned. Stop. Orkney looked up, seeing Hain and the God's Punishment Knight Legion blocking his path. Commander Hain. Chapter 2792. Obtaining Orkney did not stop. He quickly approached the direction of the Creation Temple, walking while saying, "By the order of the three great sages, I am to bring Feng Bei back to the Temple of the Gods. I told you to stop. Didn't you hear me?" Hain's tone was cold as he drew his long sword and pointed it directly at Orkney. "Coincidentally, I also received an order from the great sage. No one is allowed to approach the temple. Orkney was stunned when he saw Hain being so unreasonable, and he waved his hand to signal his subordinate team to halt. Before coming here, he never imagined that Hain's God's Punishment Night Legion would follow Fang Bei's orders so obediently, even ignoring the commands of the other three great sages. Hain. What's going on? The great sage has entered the creation temple. During this time, no one is allowed to approach. Orkney gritted his teeth and said, Hain, can't you see? Fang Bei is clearly not normal. Shut up. Hain coldly said. I will judge whether the great sage is normal or not. I will not tolerate you speaking nonsense here. Orkney furrowed his brow. Hain, the situation is urgent. I need to see Fang Bei immediately. Then wait here. Hain did not budge even a step. Orkney clenched his teeth. He knew that Hain's strength was formidable, and if they fought now, the outcome was uncertain, but it would certainly waste more time. Hain, Orkney said, the Temple of the Gods is facing a crisis. We need to harness the power of faith. Whether Fang Bei is problematic or not, we need him to return the power of faith as soon as possible, or else even the God King might. Orkney, Hain stared at Orkney, his voice deep, the God's Punishment Night Legion is loyal to the Great Sage. I trust the Great Sage's judgment. I advise you to leave now, or else don't blame me for being impolite. You're crazy, Hain. Orkney couldn't understand what spell Fang Bei had cast on Hain to make him so devoted. He was about to take action when suddenly his expression shifted. What? Orkney suddenly felt a powerful holy power ripple emanating from the Great Hall. Such a massive holy power ripple? Orkney's heart skipped a beat as he fixed his gaze on the entrance of the creation temple behind Hain. This overwhelming strength. Could it be? Everyone else also felt the immense holy power ripple and turned to look at the entrance of the creation temple. Orkney had been cultivating in the creation temple recently and was extremely familiar with the strength derived from the holy orb. Therefore, he was the first to react among the group. At that moment, a terrifying thought flashed through Orkney's mind. Fang Bei. Had he taken the creation temple's orb out? Hain also felt the overwhelming force approaching, his heart skipped a beat. He immediately waved his hand and ordered, step aside. The ripple of power from the holy orb was so vast that even the members of the God's Punishment Night Legion couldn't get too close. They obeyed the command and quickly stepped aside, retreating to the sides of the temple's large doors. Crack, 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 crack. As the great doors of the creation temple opened, everyone's faces filled with astonishment. There, floating not far above Fang Heng's head, was the creation orb, radiating visible golden holy ripples outward. Greetings, great sage. Hain, seeing this, quickly knelt along with the members of the God's Punishment Night Legion, lowering one knee in respect. Orkney's eyes were fixed on Fang Heng, his gaze filled with awe and disbelief. The holy paladins from the Holy Realm who had followed him also knelt, one by one. Orkney's heart had already been shaken to the core. He had been cultivating inside the creation temple for some time. To reach the third floor of cultivation was an achievement beyond 99% of the faithful. But this person in front of him. Not only had he approached the orb within 10 meters, but he had also controlled the orb, taking it with him out of the creation temple. What kind of power was this? Since the God King had fallen into slumber, even the combined might of the three great sages could not move the creation orb by a single inch. Fang Heng noticed Orkney among the crowd and slowly turned his head. His eyes focused on Orkney, a slight unease rising in his chest. He wasn't sure if the effect of the holy weapon's god illusion would fool Orkney. And to Orkney, Fang Heng's direct gaze felt like a clear warning. At that moment, all his doubts about Fang Heng's identity vanished. Taking a deep breath, he kneeled on one knee. Greetings, great sage. Phew. Fang Heng let out a sigh of relief in his heart, raising his hand and saying, everyone, rise. The God-given orb is in hand. Let's return to the Temple of the Gods together and rescue the God King. Yes. The guards quickly stood up, moving forward to clear the way and guide Fang Heng toward the Temple of the Gods. At the Temple of the Gods, the God King's face was twisted on one side, while the other side remained divine and solemn. Two forces were clashing within him. Ever since that battle, a special life form had invaded the God King's body. The Holy Realm had tried countless methods to expel this life form, but each attempt had failed. It wasn't until recently that the Holy Realm was suddenly invaded. When the great sages of the Holy Realm discovered Suzu, it was already too late. Suzu had forcibly awakened the remaining half of the God King's power. Subsequently, the Holy Realm locked both the God King and Suzu down tightly. However, they hadn't anticipated that Suzu had left a contingency behind, leaving fragments of herself in the bodies of Ginger and the other demonic seeds. The Holy Court had never imagined that Fang Heng would inadvertently be pulled into this. At this moment, Suzu was making her final desperate move. The Holy Realm realized that the final battle had come, and they began to activate the power of faith to suppress Suzu's power. Meanwhile, the three great sages gathered the Holy Realm's judgment bearers, archbishops, high priests, and other core members of the Holy Court, forming a united front to control Suzu's invading force inside the God King's body. The intertwining holy light pillars and the red pillars of light surged from their bodies, soaring to the sky. Despite their efforts, the Holy Court could only suppress Suzu's power for the moment. A more powerful force could fatally harm the God King, so they had to carefully manage the strength of the divine power they released, trying to wear down Suzu's power gradually. It was supposed to be nearly foolproof. But just over 20 minutes ago, Feng Hang had extracted most of the power of faith from the Starry Temple. Without the aid of the faith power, the entire Holy Realm was at a severe disadvantage. We cannot let him break through. The three great sages of the Holy Realm acted in unison, forcing their power to restrain Suzu's strength. At this point, even risking heavy damage or even the death of the God King, the three great sages had no choice but to go all out. Humphrey. Suzu snorted heavily, deciding to release all of her strength. The Holy Realm was indeed difficult to deal with. The God King's body possessed immense stamina, and even though hundreds of thousands of years had passed, the seed of Ouroboros residing within the God King's body still could not fully integrate and gain control of the God King. Chapter 2793, Interfering Last Chance. Victory and defeat were still hanging in the balance. The Holy Court's power of faith had almost been completely consumed, and she, too, was nearing her limit. With the final burst of dark red light, the entire Temple of the Gods shattered under the twisting forces of the two powers. Countless shattered pieces of the Great Hall, along with the waves of energy, were thrown outward in all directions. God King. The Holy Court's members stared intensely at the central pillar of light, where the God King stood. The God King's face flickered between light and darkness, with two forces inside him fiercely battling for dominance, each trying to devour the other's consciousness. The contest between the two powers continued. It seemed that neither side could gain the upper hand. This was bad. The great sage, Andy, realized the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The seed within the God King's body had fully sprouted, and the struggle had yet to conclude. But now, the God King's body was already showing signs of collapse. It seemed as though it could no longer hold together. If things continued this way, the outcome might still be uncertain, but the God King would break down first. Hey! At this moment, Suzu's main body had already detached from the God King's body. She smiled softly as the wounds on her body quickly healed. Slowly, she stood up and walked toward the God King, whose expression kept shifting between dark and light. She stood beside him and glanced at the three great sages who were barely holding themselves up, their staves keeping them standing. Holy Court, Suzu said with a mocking tone, it seems your strength is no longer enough to support you. This time, I've won, right? The three great sages' expressions changed drastically. This was bad. Suzu's healing ability was terrifyingly fast. They had already expended all their strength in the previous battle. They didn't have enough power left to stop her in the short term. Stop. A group of high-tier holy paladins from the Holy Realm charged towards Suzu. Humphrey. Suzu snorted heavily, and red spiritual energy exploded around her, sending the holy paladins flying once more. At the same time, she reached out and pressed her hand against the God King's left shoulder. Whoosh. Though the God King's eyes were tightly closed, as soon as Suzu made contact, his expression instantly changed. The crimson light from the two pillars of light flared up, growing even more intense and blood red. The decaying matter on the right side of the God King's body quickly spread to his left cheek. This was bad. The great sage's heart filled with anxiety. The power of the Ouroboros seed was rapidly eroding the God King's already dwindling will. Suzu smiled, but suddenly, she furrowed her brows as she sensed something. Huh? Suzu let out a soft exclamation, turning her gaze toward the distance. The great sages from the Holy Court also noticed something, and they all turned their heads to look behind them, their faces showing an intense and grave expression. That overwhelming wave of holy power. Could it be? As they looked toward the source, a golden orb appeared in their view, shimmering with golden light. Orkney and Hain led the way with their guard squad, their expressions urgent. They hadn't expected that, before even reaching the Temple of the Gods, it would already shatter completely. Their pace quickened as they hastened to arrive. We're in time. Orkney sighed in relief upon seeing that the God King was still intact, but before he could speak, he noticed Feng Hang already walking toward the God King. Feng Hang said nothing, his brow furrowed tightly. He wasn't doing well either. Having controlled the orb all the way here, the power of faith had been draining rapidly. Feng Hang noticed a crowd gathered not far ahead. At first, he couldn't tell who was who, but he immediately spotted Suzu and the two pillars of light nearby, their source unmistakable. That's right, it had to be him. The God King. Everyone, move aside. Fang Heng shouted, not wasting any time. The power of faith stored within his God-given scepter erupted in an instant, and the strength of the orb's protective shield surged towards Suzu and the God King, smashing toward them. Whoosh! The runes in the center of the orb flashed and, under the stimulation of his mental strength, the orb flew towards the God King while emitting a holy light. That was. Everyone from the holy court around them was stunned. The orb from the creation temple? Someone actually sacrificed that thing? Before anyone could react, the overwhelming power released by the orb sent high-tier bishops and priests of the holy court flying to both sides with tremendous force. As the orb neared the God King, the seed of Ouroboros within the God King's body was stirred and began to thrash violently. Ah! The God King howled in pain, throwing his head back. Suzu saw it was Fang Heng and, before she could speak, saw the holy orb hurtling toward them. Her heart shook violently. What was that thing? Suzu couldn't identify the orb, but she could sense the terrifying holy power emanating from it. The power was so intense that it was impossible to let it reach them. Whoosh! Suzu desperately summoned her strength, raising her hand toward the orb. Crack, crack, crack. The orb was frozen midair by the force, and it could not approach the God King, its distance barely 20 meters away. Fang. Suzu's voice faltered as she managed to utter a single word. Blood poured from her facial features, dripping uncontrollably. Meanwhile, the God King was in even worse shape. The holy light from the orb began purifying the black fog pouring from his body uncontrollably. The corruption on his right side was rapidly being purified as he screamed in agony. Impossible. Fang Heng's eyes widened with shock. He hadn't anticipated Suzu's strength to be so formidable that she could even influence the orb. In that case. Break. Fang Heng gathered the last bit of his power of faith and shouted. Boom. The protective layer surrounding the orb was instantly drawn away. The holy light that burst forth was even more blinding and intense. Without the external protective layer, the orb's power exploded outward, releasing an extremely bright and intense light. Suzu felt the overwhelming force coming from the orb, and a sense of fear flickered in her eyes. What kind of power was that? Even she could not withstand it. In the blink of an eye, Suzu was enveloped by the scorching holy fire and sent flying back with immense force. The God King, positioned even closer to the orb, was blasted back by the holy power and let out a pained scream. Strange worm-like creatures crawled from his mouth but were swiftly turned to ash under the purifying holy fire. Those who were farther away from the orb felt a massive surge of power pouring out, followed by an explosion of holy fire. The blinding light made almost everyone instinctively close their eyes, and the shock wave from the orb sent them flying backward. Hint: the player has obtained item unknown web-like object. Hint: the player cannot retrieve item-related information. Hint: the player has completed the kill of Bane. Player's reputation with the Holy Court and Holy Realm has increased. Obtained. Fang Heng was also affected by the holy power released by the orb, but since he was farther away, he quickly reacted and opened the game interface to check the notifications. Chapter 2794, Identification. Bane should have been the special mutant worm body that invaded the God King's body. Suzu's kill hint had not appeared yet. Sure enough, she wasn't so easy to kill. There was still a large portion of the remaining power of faith in her body. He had to find a way to kill Suzu. Anyway, he had completely offended Suzu this time. While she was seriously injured. Kill her. Whoosh. Before anyone could react, Fang Heng's toes slammed heavily on the ground, and he rapidly chased towards Suzu's direction. The intense light waves emitted by the orb didn't begin to slow down until more than 10 minutes later. At this time, the people of the Holy Court had long retreated more than 500 meters away from the orb. The God King, who was directly impacted by the orb's waves, was blasted far away. Lord God King. The great sage Aladdin flew to the God King's side, pressed his fingers against the God King's forehead to sense him, and his face immediately showed signs of joy. The traces of the Ouroboros seed, which had troubled the God King for many years, had completely disappeared from within the God King's body. Lord God King is fine. Quickly, take him down to rest. Hearing that the God King was not seriously injured, the people of the Holy Realm sighed in relief and then shifted their gaze toward the ruins of the battlefield. The God-given orb levitated in the center of the Temple of the Gods, continuously emitting radiating halos outward. Was it Fang Bei? The crowd looked at each other. Things happened so quickly earlier that everyone's attention had been focused on the Holy Realm orb. The energy fluctuations released by the God-given orb were so intense that the aura fluctuations from Fang Heng were completely overshadowed. Additionally, since no one had ever seen Fang Bei's appearance, they couldn't recognize him. Yes. At this moment, Orkney stepped forward and quickly described the events, saying, "Earlier, I was ordered by the Great Sage to track Fang Bei, but I was stopped by Commander Hain outside the Creation Temple. But I didn't expect." After hearing Orkney's account, The three great sages exchanged glances. The God-given orb. So, had they misunderstood? Had Fang Bei forcibly entered the Starry Temple to seize the power of faith to control the God-given orb to deal with Suzu and the Ouroboros seed? But how did he manage to do it? Did he solely rely on the power of faith? The Holy Realm had once considered using the God-given orb from the Creation Temple to deal with the Ouroboros seed inside the God King. However, no one had been able to move the orb inside the Creation Temple. Even the combined efforts of the three great sages couldn't accomplish it. Once the God King approached the Creation Temple, the Ouroboros seed would be triggered, causing it to act violently and make even more irrational moves. Now, looking back, Fang Bei's actions could be speculated upon. Was it Fang Bei who truly saved the Holy Realm from peril? Humphrey. Dean saw the expressions of the two great sages and guessed what they were thinking. He sneered and said disdainfully, "You all seem to have forgotten what led to things reaching this point. If Fang Bei hadn't absorbed such a large amount of the power of faith, we might not have failed. Alright, there's no need to continue discussing this. No one could say for sure what would have happened if Fang Bei hadn't appeared. At least, the current situation was acceptable to the Holy Court. The lost power of faith could be slowly accumulated again, the damaged sub-god pillars and the lower world could be rebuilt gradually, and most importantly, the Ouroboros seed inside the God King had been completely eradicated. Next, there was still much work to be done. Where is Fang Bei? Not found. Orkney scanned the surroundings. I haven't seen any trace of Commander Hain either. They may have gone after Suzu? Aladdin furrowed his brows upon hearing this. This wasn't good. Suzu was extremely powerful. If Fang Bei rashly chased after her alone, he might run into trouble. Let's go. Follow them and see. On the other side, Suzu had already left the central god pillar and was retreating toward the world beneath the pillar. Fang Heng. Suzu's face twisted with anger, and crimson blood continuously oozed from her skin. First, she had gathered strength with the Holy Court's experts, and then she was hit by the Holy Orb's power at close range. Even though she had now escaped, the remaining power from the Holy Orb that had invaded her body was still wreaking havoc inside her. She needed to find a place to rest and stabilize her injuries. Whoosh! Suzu frowned, stopping in her tracks as she looked ahead at three figures emerging from the bushes. "It's you guys." Suzu sneered, then sensed something, turning her head to look at the dense forest around her. Figures slowly emerged from the woods, gradually surrounding Suzu at the center. A total of 16 demonic seeds gathered, enclosing her tightly in the middle. Suzu squinted her eyes and slowly raised her right hand, attempting to control the clone parasitizing Jinger's body. Eh? How could this be? Surprise appeared on Suzu's face. Was it ineffective? Humphrey. What's this? Your methods have failed? Ginger snorted coldly and took the first move to attack. Altogether. A proud demonic seed. To think it had been controlled by a woman for so long. Ginger's inner anger could no longer be contained. In an instant, the 16 demonic seeds launched a combined assault. In her heavily injured state, Suzu felt immense pressure and was forced to defend herself. Had it been at her full strength, she would have been confident of victory, but now. Not far away, Fang Heng, who was chasing after them, sensed the energy fluctuations ahead and nodded inwardly. The demonic seeds were still reliable. Chase. By the time Fang Heng reached the battlefield, Suzu's health had already been reduced to a third under the relentless attacks of the demonic seeds. It could be done. Suzu was terrifyingly powerful. If he killed her, he might be able to obtain a holy weapon. He had to kill her before the Holy Court arrived. I'll do it! Fang Heng shouted, quickly closing the distance to Suzu. He gripped the God-given scepter tightly and swung it forward with great force. Crushing strike. Suzu was struck by Fang Heng's powerful blow and was violently knocked back. Fang Heng glanced at the game hint, checking Suzu's remaining health. The strike had directly taken 5% of Suzu's health. Fang Heng furrowed his brow. Even though Suzu was severely injured, she was still hard to deal with. The Holy Court is already on its way. Everyone, go together, and hurry up and finish her off. Understood. The 16 demonic seeds each had their methods and relentlessly pursued Suzu, attacking her with everything they had. After his strike, Fang Heng fell back to the rear of the group, his brow furrowed. Strange. It seemed that Suzu was being overwhelmed by the combined assault of the demonic seeds, but in reality, when her health dropped to 20%, it stopped decreasing. A special ability? There was no time to wait any longer. Chapter 2795, Pursuit. Fang Heng's heart stirred, and he quickly dodged to Suzu's side, raising his hand towards her. God's punishment. Whoosh. Suzu, who was still in the air after being blasted away by the demonic seed, was affected by a special strength. She flew uncontrollably toward Fang Heng, and Fang Heng pressed her head down. Boom. A dazzling holy light flashed, and Suzu's body was burning with a scorching holy fire. It was not until this moment that a trace of fear finally appeared in Suzu's eyes. Feng Heng. How dare you? Hey, do you think I dare? Feng Heng roared, fully unleashing his mental strength to activate the effect of God's punishment. Boom. The holy light mixed with purple lightning kept falling from the sky, hitting Suzu's body. Each hit dealt hundreds of thousands of damage. Suzu gritted her teeth and withstood the power of God's punishment. Her eyes were bloodshot as she stared at Feng Heng. You killed the seed of Ouroboros that I cultivated. You are already a dead man. It's too late to kill me now, Feng Heng. Thanks, but you don't need to worry about my matters. Feng Heng said coldly. He hadn't expected that even God's punishment wouldn't be able to take down Suzu. Well, then let's try this. Earlier, when controlling the God-given orb, there was still a large portion of the power of faith remaining, which Feng Heng had originally planned to save for later use. But now, there was no need to hold back. Feng Heng gathered and unleashed the remaining power of faith in his body. God's punishment. Boom. A heavy purple light fell from the sky. A number over 1,000,000 exploded above Suzu's head. Again. Boom. 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 With the continuous bombardment of God's punishment skills, Suzu's HP finally began to rapidly plummet below 20%. The surrounding demonic seeds could no longer help. They gathered around Feng Heng and watched Suzu's skin and flesh disintegrate rapidly under the dazzling holy light and the effect of the thunder calamity. Their eyes revealed a touch of surprise. Greed, this kid. They were all demonic seeds, yet his strength had progressed so rapidly. It could even be described as terrifying. After a moment, a game notification appeared on Feng Heng's retina. Hint, the player has killed Suzu. Hint, the player has caused an unknown effect. Hint, special identity detected. Player has triggered the final mission early Seed of Ouroboros. Mission name, Seed of Ouroboros. Mission difficulty, SSS. Mission description, because you killed Fan En and Suzu, the Seed of Ouroboros war has officially begun. Players are required to kill the remaining seeds of Ouroboros. During the mission, you may be attacked by other seeds of Ouroboros. Mission requirements, ensure survival and kill the remaining seeds of Ouroboros. Mission reward? A mission? A trace of suspicion flashed in Feng Heng's mind. He immediately flipped his wrist and swiped through the ashes left behind after Suzu was burned. Hint, the player has obtained 5 Holy Spirit crystals. Exquisite. Hint, the player has obtained item unknown cocoon. Hint, the player's current mission crisis of the Holy Realm completed. Hint, the player has completed the mission. The player has received the reward Forging Hammer, with 3 consecutive items added to his inventory. Feng Heng finally had time to carefully examine the mission description. Seed of Ouroboros? What was that? Was it something that once attached to the God King, trying to take over the God King's consciousness and body? Feng Heng furrowed his brows, staring intently at the game hints, deep in thought. Hey, Feng Heng. While Feng Heng was still pondering the Seed of Ouroboros, he heard Jinger's call. He looked up and, somewhat absent-mindedly, nodded to her. This time, I owe you a favor. I'll return it when I get the chance. Farewell. The teleportation passage is still open. You can use its power to leave this place. You don't need to worry about it. We're leaving. Jinger waved his hand and hurriedly left with the group of demonic seeds. Baimu also walked over and whispered, Feng Heng, the Holy Court has dealt with the Ouroboros problem. Next, they will try to regain control of the sub-god pillars. We need to hurry and leave. Feng Heng responded and glanced back in the direction of the King of God's pillar. The journey to the Holy Realm was nearly finished for now. Baimu's identity was still too easy to be seen through by the great sage, so it was better not to take any more risks. Anyway, the mission rewards had already been obtained, and Old Black and the others should have already moved most of the valuable items from the sub-god pillars. The journey to the Holy Realm was nearly finished for now. We're leaving. We'll talk later. In the distance, the great sage, Dean, and Aladdin, along with other high-ranking members of the Holy Realm, rushed towards Feng Heng. When they saw the giant lightning bolt from God's punishment earlier, both of them couldn't help but feel more anxious. God's punishment. It was a special ability of the great sage. Even they didn't possess such power. It was clear that Feng Heng had wanted to finish off Suzu completely. Although Suzu had been severely injured, could Feng Heng alone defeat her? As the power of God's punishment gradually dissipated in the distance, Dean furrowed his brows and said, something's wrong. There's a strong demonic seed aura over there. Let's go. Let's catch up and see. More than 10 minutes later, Aladdin and his group reached the area where Suzu's aura had dissipated. Once again, everyone fell silent. Where is she? I can't sense anything. Aladdin tried sensing the aura again but shook his head and said, I can't sense any energy fluctuations from Fang Heng or Suzu. However, there's still a ripple from the demonic seed. It seems they went towards the lower world. This was strange. Not only had Suzu's aura disappeared, but Fang Heng's aura had also vanished completely. The demonic seed must have gone towards the Hell Gate. They likely escorted Suzu away, Dean said, his brow slightly furrowed as he became concerned about Fang Heng's situation. Fang Heng's aura is also gone. Did the demonic seeds take him away? Uncertain. Aladdin gently shook his head. It seemed that Fang Heng and Suzu had fought here. It was unclear who had won or lost. But both of their auras had disappeared. Interestingly, there was still an extremely strong demonic seed aura nearby. Had they encountered the demonic seed during the battle? Were they defeated by the demonic seeds? The two exchanged glances. Immediately send people to search for Fang Heng's whereabouts. We need to regain control of the sub-god pillars. Yes. Great Sage. Half an hour later, in the Emerald game world, Fang Heng successfully transported the last batch of materials from the Holy Realm back to the Mist Temple in Emerald via the teleportation passage. At the same time, he destroyed the spatial teleportation passage between the Mist Temple and the Holy Realm, as well as the descent device of the Holy Realm. Finally, the journey to the Holy Realm was completely over. Fang Heng sighed with relief, sitting next to the passage and watching the zombie clones go back and forth, transporting the massive amounts of materials accumulated in the Mist Temple. The Holy Realm journey had came to a temporary conclusion. Chapter 2796, Forging Next. These materials needed to be transported to the world controlled by the Undead Council for a transfer, and then finally sent into the zombie apocalypse. The quantity of goods obtained from the Holy Realm this time was huge, and they needed to be carefully sorted before they could be counted. Fang Heng roughly estimated. With the addition of these high-tier exhibition items, after some renovations, it was conservatively estimated that the Temple of Zeus in the zombie apocalypse could be upgraded to at least S level. This way, there would be a source for the holy faith of God in the future, and there would be no need to repeatedly seek out the Holy Court to exploit them. In addition, a large amount of holy attribute equipment and accessories could be sold through Old Black and Starfish Company to the outside. In short, this haul was quite profitable. Taking advantage of the free time, Fang Heng finally had the opportunity to examine the rewards of this mission. First, regarding the battle situation. When he previously used the God-given orb against Suzu, Fang Heng could perceive that the God King was not dead. This meant that after a period of rest, the Holy Realm, under the leadership of the God King, could become even harder to deal with. Of course, most of the 12 sub-god pillars of the Holy Realm had already been looted, and the Temple of Faith in the lower world, built by the Godwing tribe, had been largely destroyed by the Hell Army. It was estimated that the Holy Court was also in trouble and would take a long time to rebuild. He hoped they wouldn't bother him for a while. As for the demonic seeds, Ginger and his group left in a hurry, but from their actions, it seemed they were heading towards the Hell Gate, likely returning to Hell. Could they be planning something in Hell? Fang Heng, are you alright? I'm fine. Fang Heng was contemplating this when he looked up and saw Beimu and a few demonic seeds approaching him. Fang Heng, are you alright? I'm fine. Fang Heng stood up and asked, are you all getting ready to leave? Yes. The information Ginger provided earlier is very important. If we can't find a way to break the demon core controlled by the jealousy demonic seed, it will be impossible to completely defeat jealousy. Wu Yan, standing beside Beimu, continued, we discussed it, and opening the Hell Gate isn't a simple task. I suspect Ginger has been hiding some information from us. Right now, they're entering Hell through the Hell Gate, likely searching for a way to break the demonic seed core. We've just discussed it and also plan to find a way to open a passage to Hell to see if we can find any clues. What about you? Will you join us? No. Fang Heng thought for a moment and shook his head. I have other matters to attend to. Also, there are some clues related to the seed of Ouroboros on Suzu that I'm interested in. I'll continue following that lead. Alright. Beimu nodded. The undead are here to escort you. We can't afford to have too much contact with outsiders, so we'll leave first. Farewell. Stay in touch and take care. Fang Heng watched as Beimu and his group quickly left, then glanced at the new mission he had obtained. Final mission Seed of Ouroboros. Just reading the mission description, it seemed extremely dangerous. He would likely face opponents of a similar level to Suzu. For example. Fang Heng narrowed his eyes slightly. For example, in the Death Realm, there was the Seed of Disaster, Proust, and the so-called Cultivator, Mukinkson. The two of them were likely at the same level as Suzu. Reflecting on everything that happened in the Death Realm and the Holy Realm, Fang Heng felt there might be a clear pattern. Proust from the Death Realm and Mukinkson, the Cultivator. In the Holy Realm, the Ouroboros attached to the God King, trying to take over the God King's will, along with Suzu, the Cultivator of Ouroboros. If he were to draw parallels in hell, there was the mysterious god who assisted the jealousy demonic seed in splitting the powers of other demonic seeds. Feng Heng was now about 90% certain that person was likely Zai. Based on all the information combined, it seemed highly probable that Feng Heng himself was also a seed of Ouroboros, and his cultivator was Zai. Was it time to talk to Zai about this? Feng Heng shook his head. No, it wasn't time yet. He decided to wait a little longer. First, he needed to finish the follow-up missions in the Death Realm. Feng Heng then shifted his focus from the Ouroboros-related mission. Next, he looked at the biggest reward from this trip, the Orb Barrier. It was a protective net of dark gold. Although the barrier couldn't display its description, Feng Heng had already figured out how to use it. Once he returned to the Death Realm, he could immediately start moving the Death Realm's orb. With that thought, Feng Heng turned his attention to the next item in his backpack. Item: Forging Hammer, Type: Special Item, disappears after use. Description: The Forging Master, Belloc, spent his life pursuing the ultimate potential of equipment strength. After his death, his will and soul infused into the forging hammer he used, granting it special abilities. Usage effect: This item can only be used on equipment. After use, it fully unlocks the potential of certain equipment, improving its effectiveness. Description: After unlocking the potential, the equipment's level can be enhanced. Feng Heng carefully examined the item description. The forging hammer was a reward from the Holy Realm mission. It was a one-time use item that could permanently tap into the potential of an item. It looked pretty good, didn't it? If used on demigod-level items, the item could be forged and advanced into a holy weapon? Feng Heng pondered the item description and then opened his backpack to check again. Unfortunately, most of his equipment was in an unusable state, and a few low-level garbage items wouldn't have much of an effect even if upgraded to one level. Seems a bit useless. Feng Heng muttered to himself, when suddenly his eyelids twitched, and his gaze quickly focused on a piece of jewelry in his backpack. No way? The divine prank. A holy weapon. It actually showed it could be used? Feng Heng didn't hesitate and immediately used the forging hammer to forge it. Hint: the holy weapon divine prank has been detected to have potential. You may use the forging hammer to enhance its attributes. Do you wish to proceed? Use. Whoosh. In the next moment, the forging hammer disappeared from the inventory, and the divine prank gemstone shone with dark golden light. Hint: the attributes of the holy weapon divine prank have been enhanced. Feng Heng immediately took the gemstone out of his backpack and observed the changes in its attributes. Item: Gemstone divine prank, type: Holy weapon. Description: This item activates while stored in the backpack and will always drop upon death, can be embedded in necklaces, rings, and other jewelry, further enhancing the attributes of the jewelry. Description: Forced increase of 20 points in the player's charm value. Additional skill 1, Real prank. Skill description: The player can fabricate a special identity. This identity will not be affected by any detection type skills. The fabricated identity can accept missions and complete them for rewards. The player can switch between their main body identity and fabricated identity at will. Cooldown time: 120 seconds. Once the fabricated identity is deleted after 24 hours, a new identity can be fabricated. Additional description: The player's main body and fabricated identity share all attributes and skill enhancements. The clone is the real body and cannot be seen through. Additional skill 2, God's Blessing. Skill description: The player becomes immune to all god level or lower spying, detection, and tracking effects. Chapter 2797, Star Map. After leveling up, the biggest change in the holy weapon was that, after using the simulated character, it became completely immune to being seen through. It also no longer had the limitation of the simulated character's effect completely fading after 72 hours like it did before. In addition, the secondary additional skill had been upgraded, now providing immunity to tracking effects below the god level. With this, even the Holy Court's pursuers from the Holy Realm couldn't track his exact position. What a great thing. Wait. Suddenly, Feng Heng's eyes lit up, and his heart began to beat faster. Currently, the character he was simulating with the holy weapon was Fang Bei. By a stroke of luck, he had advanced to the status of a great sage of the Holy Court. At present, this identity had not been seen through by the people of the Holy Realm. Does this mean that when he encounters the Holy Court again, he could continue to use the identity of Great Sage Fang Bei to carry out his plans? Since the holy weapon's protection ensured that the simulated effect wouldn't be seen through, it was absolutely feasible. Feng Heng quickly ran through the idea in his mind and found no flaws, immediately showing a pleased expression. This was a win. With that thought, Feng Heng put the gemstones back into his backpack. As for the last item, the unknown cocoon that had dropped after Suzu's death, it was about the size of a palm and could perfectly fit in his hand. He didn't know what it was for. The item hint indicated that players needed a research lab level to confirm its true purpose. He decided to hold on to it and give it to Kaiyu Yokang for research once they returned to the zombie apocalypse. Finally, there was the protective shield from the Holy Orb of the Holy Realm. Hurry and transport the Orb of the Death Realm from the Abyss of Despair back. With my half-step god-level necromancy, it shouldn't be too difficult to control the orb and move it slowly. The next afternoon. Holy Realm. After the three great sages finished checking on the God King's condition, they left the God King's palace and walked toward the central Great Hall under the God Pillar. Although the God King was still in a coma, the Ouroboros seed inside him had been completely eradicated. Great Sage Aladdin judged that the God King had sustained severe damage during his battle with the Will of Boon, and he was now in a self-induced hibernation state, accelerating his healing process. It was estimated that he would wake up within a month. For the Holy Court, this was fantastic news. The God King had finally awakened after slumbering for hundreds of thousands of years. With the God King's power, the entire Holy Realm would rise again. Such a great piece of news had left the three great sages in a relatively good mood. Great sages, there is something I need to report. Orkney hurriedly approached with two guards accompanying him. What is it? Great sage, I have already reconstructed the passages leading from the King of God's pillar to the sub-god pillars as per your instructions. Currently, all sub-god pillars are under control again, but what? The sub-god pillars have been severely damaged. We found that almost all the temples, Zeus temples, central temples, sub-god pillar temples, priest temples, and temples of faith, etc., have been completely emptied, dismantled. Orkney took a deep breath, then listed off nearly all the temples located at the sub-god pillars one by one. What do you mean? Are you saying the temples at the god pillars have been destroyed by demons? Orkney hesitated for a moment, then with a bitter expression, explained, it doesn't seem like it was destroyed, more like it was dismantled. Dismantled? All of it? Aladdin paused, doubting if he had heard correctly. He turned to Orkney and asked, are you saying everything is gone? Everything was taken apart? Yes, we've checked, all the temples have been thoroughly dismantled. What's going on? The three great sages looked at each other, their brows furrowed tightly. The good mood they had just moments ago was now nearly extinguished. Everything has been taken apart? Although they had already mentally prepared themselves to spend decades rebuilding the god pillars that had been damaged by the demonic seeds, everything was taken away? Wasn't that a bit too strange? Orkney lowered his head. He had been stunned when he saw the scene at the sub-god pillars. Everything had been taken away, it felt like someone had stripped the place clean, like their home had been looted. Great Sage Dean's face instantly contorted with anger, and he exclaimed, the demonic seeds. Taking advantage of the God King's crisis to carry out such malicious acts. When the God King wakes up, I will make them pay 100-fold. Aladdin furrowed his brow, feeling that something was off. The primary target of the demonic seeds had been to destroy the temples of faith throughout the Holy Realm. It made sense that they would destroy the Starry Temple in the sub-god pillars, but how did they have time to move everything from the temples? Let's assume they had the time. What would they even want with all those things? It really didn't make sense. Also, we've just received some news from the lower world that needs to be reported to the three great sages immediately. Orkney paused, then looked at the three great sages and continued. We learned from the believers in humanity that during the God King's battle with the will of the Ouroboros seed, the Federation initiated the Star Map project. Most of the items in the temples were just decorations. They might be useful for building high-level temples for the Holy Court, but they were completely useless to the demonic seeds from hell. Even if they were to damage something out of malice, the demonic seeds only needed to destroy the items in the temples. Why move them? It really didn't make sense. Also, we've just received some news from the lower world that needs to be reported to the three great sages immediately. Orkney paused, then looked at the three great sages and continued. We learned from the believers in humanity that during the God King's battle with the will of the Ouroboros seed, the Federation initiated the Star Map project. Upon hearing this, the three great sages' expressions changed slightly. Humphrey. After a long while, Dean snorted lightly, clearly displeased, and said, I knew it. Those Inhumans are unreliable. They said they were willing to cooperate with us, to become devout believers of our Holy Court. But now it's clear, they were just trying to cheat us out of resources. They're nothing but scheming, two-faced people. Aladdin thought for a moment and asked, what's the Inhuman Federation's stance on this? The Inhuman Central Federation claims that this was a private matter from their western region. The Central Federation is already in communication with us and has promised to end the Star Map project as soon as possible. Orkney nodded and responded, because of the seed of Ouroboros, I got the news a little late. I've already sent people to confirm the details. From the movements of the humans and the scale of the Star Map project, I believe the Central Federation must have known about it. There's no way they didn't. That's right, Dean agreed, nodding thoughtfully. It's too much of a coincidence. Our Holy Realm is dealing with trouble and can't intervene, while the North District just happens to be carrying out the Star Map project. I don't believe the Central Federation didn't have a hand in this. Aladdin sighed inwardly and shook his head. Never mind. Orkney, let's wait until the God King wakes up to discuss this further. Aladdin, what do you mean by that? We've already invested so much effort into the Inhumans. Now you want to give up? The Star Map project is just the first step. We're far from abandoning this. If we were a little more forceful, if we just pressured the humans. Enough, Dean. The great sage waved his hand. One seed of our Ouroboros has already put us in a difficult position. Right now, everything revolves around the God King's safety. I don't want to make another enemy. Dean's expression darkened, and he said, You're all too soft-hearted. If it were up to me, I'd give them a lesson they wouldn't forget. Chapter 2798, Transfer the Real World. It was an ordinary day. But the official game forum was buzzing like a holiday, with server traffic hitting its limits and various trending topics constantly updating. The Western District Federation was up to something big. A massive change occurred in the human world. The special barrier defense above the clouds in the Western District Federation, the Sky Network, was fully revealed to humanity. An integrated offensive and defensive interstellar weapon. The Sky Ray. The Western District Federation made a formal announcement, stating that in response to the recent frequent occurrences of game invasions into the real world, they had established the Sky Network. This defensive barrier was capable of providing immediate preemptive warnings and location tracking in the event of game-related threats, and, in coordination with human special event investigation teams, could quickly eliminate potential dangers. Immediately, the internet was flooded with discussions about the Sky Barrier. Most of the public, eager to jump on the bandwagon, believed that the Western District Federation had been secretly preparing for years and had finally unveiled their big move. However, a portion of the players sensed a looming crisis. Of course, if Fang Heng had seen the space above the planet at that moment, he would have immediately recognized it. The so-called Sky Barrier. It was remarkably similar to the high-tier spatial prism barrier of the game's spawn creatures. The Death Realm. Fang Heng first returned to the zombie apocalypse, handed the cocoon that Souza had left behind after her death to Caillou Yokang for analysis, and then immediately went back to the Death Realm to find Teacher Gulwo to deliver the mission. Ha 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 ha. Fang Heng. Well done. I knew I didn't misjudge you. I've already heard the news about the supplies moved from the Holy Realm. Ha ha ha, I heard they filled up 8 warehouses. Great job. Teacher Gulwo, upon hearing that Fang Heng had successfully defeated the Holy Court and even caused such chaos in the Holy Realm, was naturally overjoyed. He patted Fang Heng on the shoulder, clearly pleased with his achievements. Fang Heng had far exceeded the expectations for this mission. It was a massive overachievement. It felt amazing. Teacher Gulwo secretly envied Jiziobo for being able to work with Fang Heng on such a grand project in the Holy Realm. Unfortunately, he still had a mission from the Undead Council to attend to and couldn't leave. Fang Heng had destroyed 2 game worlds of the Holy Court, sabotaged a large-scale descent device of the Holy Court, wrecked many temples of faith the Holy Court had set up in the Holy Realm, and completely emptied out the 12 sub-god pillar temples of the Holy Court in the Holy Realm. If it weren't for the orders from the Undead Council to remain in the Death Realm, he would have gone to see the aftermath with his own eyes. It was rare for Teacher Gulwo to be this happy, and he generously rewarded Fang Heng with the highest rank of King of Gods points. Hint: the player has submitted the mission Teacher Gulwo's commission. Hint: calculating. The player has successfully destroyed the Holy Court's game worlds. The player's mission completion rating is increasing. Hint: calculating. The player has successfully destroyed the Holy Court's special descent device. The player's mission rating is improving. The player's kills are being counted. The player's mission rating is increasing. Hint: calculating. The player's mission completion rate has reached the maximum limit. The player's current mission evaluation, SSS, additional increases will only affect the reward coefficient. Hint: calculating. The player has entered the Holy Realm and caused damage to the sub-god pillars. Statistics in progress. Hint: calculating. The player participated in the destruction of 2,781 temples of faith in the Holy Realm. Hint: the player is completing the hostile faction mission. Additional statistics on how the mission impacts faction missions. Hint: judging. The player has earned 68,631 watts King of Gods points as a reward, a bountiful harvest. Fang Heng was overjoyed as he saw a wave of King of Gods points flood in. Teacher Gulwo was reliable. It was as though he had received a double reward, one from the Undead Council and the Holy Court faction quests, and the other from Teacher Gulwo's commission mission. Double the King of Gods points. A huge windfall. Over 600 million King of Gods points was more than enough to complete the transformation of all his zombie clones into lickers. Not just lickers, but the original devouring body transformation could also cover a significant portion of the zombie clones. Feng Heng thought to himself. By the way, Feng Heng, while you were away, we've continued the investigation into the orb protective net. Unfortunately, there are still no new clues. Despite the intense battle in the Holy Realm, only a day had passed. Teacher Guo wiped the excitement off his face and became serious. Right now, we still have a lot of troubles. Progress on the Empress ruins is slow. If possible, we'd like to enlist your zombie clones to help speed up the exploration of the ruins, particularly the Fern Bowl area. No need, Feng Heng shook his head. Teacher Guo, during my time in the Holy Realm, I found something useful. If everything goes well, we might not even need the orb protective net lost in the Death Realm. Teacher Guo's eyes lit up, and he looked at Feng Heng. Really? Yes, but I'll need a few things, and it'll take some time to go deeper into the abyss of despair, Feng Heng said. Then, leaning in, he whispered a few words into Teacher Guo's ear. Teacher Guo nodded. All right, leave it to me. I'll report to the Undead Council immediately and help you apply for a spatial scroll. 3 days later. The Death Realm. Abyss of Despair. Despite advancing to the Great Sage in the Holy Realm, Feng Heng still spent a considerable amount of time diving deeper into the Abyss of Despair. Finally. Ahead of him, the altar and the massive phantom of the orb slowly came into view. Feng Heng tilted his head, observing the Death Realm orb suspended above the sacrificial altar in the distance. The orb looked the same as it had when he left last time, showing no signs of change. I hope this works. Feng Heng glanced at the orb protective net in his backpack, took a deep breath, and slowly extended his right hand toward the orb. Whoosh! A barrier net appeared in the palm of Feng Heng's hand. With a forceful flick of his wrist, he sent the protective shield toward the orb. Pa! The shield landed with precise and effortless precision on the outer layer of the orb, completely enveloping it. It worked. Feng Heng immediately clenched his fist, excitement flashing in his eyes. The moment the protective net enveloped the orb, a significant portion of the Death Realm orb's power was immediately contained, and the opposing strength spilling out from the orb was reduced by at least half. With the weakening of the opposing force, Feng Heng took a step forward, moving even closer to the orb. He stopped when he was only about 20 meters away from it. Feng Heng raised his head, focusing intently on the orb, his hands coming together in front of him to form an imprint. Whoosh! The Book of the Dead suddenly levitated in front of Feng Heng. With a mental push, Feng Heng summoned 4 black soul chains from the Book of the Dead. The chains shot toward the orb on the sacrificial altar, reaching out with swift precision. The 4 soul chains stopped just half a meter from the orb, hovering in midair, pointing directly at it. Although the chains didn't physically touch the orb, they were already able to exert some control over it. Whoosh! A dark rune mark slowly began to appear on the surface of the orb. Chapter 2799, Rebuilding. Got it. Feng Heng quickly completed the connection between his spirit, will, and the rune, then began to control the protective net to move. Buzz. The orb slowly floated forward, under the effect of the outer protective net, until it completely left the altar. Very good. Feng Heng slowed his breathing and fixed his gaze on the Death Realm orb. Next, he just needed to take the Death Realm orb away from the Death Realm. Controlling the Death Realm orb was not as difficult as controlling the Holy Realm orb, but it still required immense mental strength. If he wanted to transport it back, it would take even more time. Feng Heng had considered trying to use the spatial teleportation hub to bring it back. After thinking it through, he decided the risk was too high. The spatial teleportation hub, being a small passage, might not be able to withstand the orb's intensity. Moreover, his main body couldn't follow through the hub, which could lead to trouble. Even the ripples emitted by the orb were so strong that they might affect the teleportation passage. If any spatial turbulence occurred, he wouldn't know where the orb would end up, which would be even more troublesome. It had taken so much effort to get the orb, he couldn't afford to fail at the last moment. After considering it thoroughly, Feng Heng sought help from the Undead Council. After a discussion, the Undead Council immediately brought out a long-preserved spatial passage scroll. Even in the Death Realm, a holy weapon-grade teleportation scroll could directly open a spatial passage that lasted for 10 minutes. It was said that the scroll was created by a god-level spatial science master and could be used in almost any location. Only 10 of these scrolls remained in the world, and each use meant one less scroll. Before entering the Abyss of Despair, Feng Heng had already bound the other side of the scroll to the vampire apocalypse. Feng Heng took a deep breath, stretched out his right hand, and gently lifted it toward the air. Whoosh! Under the activation of the scroll, a faint vortex slowly appeared in the gray-white space on the right side of the Abyss of Despair. Kai. The vortex made a hissing sound, gradually growing larger and expanding, forming a dark spatial teleportation passage in midair. Impressive. Feng Heng stared at the spatial teleportation passage, his eyes showing a hint of admiration. Ordinary spatial passages had extremely strong spatial fluctuations around them, and the surrounding space would become highly unstable. But this scroll, summoned through a magic array, was completely different. Feng Heng could hardly perceive any spatial fluctuation except for the vortex itself. No wonder it was a scroll created by a master. Unfortunately, even the Undead Council only had one such high-level scroll. Exchanging the scroll had cost Feng Heng a significant portion of his faction points, and he had been a bit reluctant at the time. Now, however, it seemed worth every bit. Feng Heng stopped thinking further and took a deep breath, focusing his mind. He slowly moved the Death Realm orb toward the teleportation passage. Until, with the orb in tow, he stepped into the vortex. Whoosh! The Death Realm lost the orb. The surrounding spatial passage in the abyss of despair immediately stagnated. In an instant, the gray-white space around gradually regained a bit of vitality, slowly returning to its original color. Souls that had been wandering toward the area, following the guidance, suddenly lost their direction and stopped in confusion, looking around in a daze. Crack, 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 crack. On both sides of the altar, small cracks gradually appeared on the gate of the soul will, which originally led to hell in the Holy Realm. Vampire Apocalypse. The sky was shrouded by a layer of faint gray clouds. If a high-tier necromancy scholar were to observe, they would undoubtedly discern that this cloud was formed by a dense gathering of death aura. With the recent opening of the gateways between the Death Realm and various high-tier worlds, large quantities of materials from the Death Realm continued to be transported into the Vampire Apocalypse. The concentration of death aura within the Vampire Apocalypse was gradually increasing. Currently, aside from Feng Heng's zombie clone, the Undead Council had also sent some player teams into the Vampire Apocalypse to assist with the material transportation. 3 teams of players rotated every 8 hours. It was exhausting. But the necromancy players were desperately eager to sign up. In exchange for their work, they would be granted an opportunity to advance their vampire bloodline. Recently, the price of the vampire bloodline had skyrocketed on the black market, reaching almost incomprehensible levels. There were even rumors circulating within the necromancy community, claiming that access to the highest-tier god-level necromancy passage required the assistance of the vampire bloodline. At first, many people didn't believe it. It was rumored that Feng Heng had an ambiguous relationship with the undead faction, and this made the possibility seem somewhat credible. Now, the high-tier missions of the undead faction were offering the vampire bloodline as a reward? This development made the players, who had been skeptical, believe the rumors more than ever. As the glow ascended, an overwhelming aura of death slowly spilled over the horizon. Suddenly, one of the players noticed something and looked up toward the distance. In the distance, a dark red glow began to rise. As the glow ascended, an overwhelming aura of death slowly spilled over the horizon. All the players turned their attention toward the source of the light, feeling as if a massive weight were pressing on their chests, making it hard to breathe. For some reason, every player felt a strong sense of foreboding. Something major was happening. Thinking about it, the players all turned their gaze toward their necromancy instructor, Heinzbill. Heinzbill also lifted his head and looked toward the red light in the distance. During this time, Heinzbill had been staying in the Vampire Apocalypse, coordinating with the senior members of the Undead Council to help ensure the safe transport of materials for the final Tier 1, phase. Suddenly, Heinzbill sensed something. Residual soul wills. In the distance, the sky slowly shifted from red to dark, before it seemed to be covered by a layer of grayish-white, radiating an eerie silence of death. Heinzbill's pupils took on a shade of dead gray, and he saw fragments of soul wills gathering in that direction. What exactly is causing this? Heinzbill had attended high-level meetings with the Undead Council, and he had only heard of special actions being undertaken regarding the Death Realm. Could the operation have already succeeded? The players couldn't sense or see the traces of those broken soul bodies or their wills, but seeing their instructor staring intently at the horizon, now shrouded in grayish-white, lost in thought, made them uneasy. One of the players couldn't help but ask quietly, "Instructor, what is this?" "Everyone, remember this day well," Heinzbill looked at the group of students. "This is a day that will go down in the history of the Undead Council." Meanwhile, in the gray-white space, Feng Heng stood still, his eyes tightly shut. Hint: the player has acquired the Death Realm orb. Hint: the current game world level has significantly increased. Hint: due to the player's possession of the Death Realm orb, a special passage for the reincarnation of souls from the Death Realm and Holy Realm will continue to be constructed. This passage is special, and players cannot enter it. Under the black and white light, Feng Heng slowly opened his eyes. After bringing the Death Realm orb over, he spent some additional time transporting the damaged altar back to the vampire apocalypse. Chapter 2800, The Altar. The Death Realm Orb was placed upon the altar, casting its reflection high in the sky. At the same time, two faint wisps of mist began to gradually condense on either side of the altar. The mist slowly formed the appearance of gateways leading to the Holy Realm and Hell. Feng Heng pulled his gaze away from the passage. At this moment, because of the existence of the Death Realm Orb and the altar, the entire vampire apocalypse world was gradually being transformed into the Death Realm. Now, it was just a matter of time. The creation of the Death Realm Orb and the passage would take time. As souls guided to the vampire apocalypse world continued to pour in and enter the abyss of despair, and once the gates of soul will to the Holy Realm and Hell were fully opened, the Death Realm Orb would guide the reincarnation of souls, absorbing their willpower and strength, then gathering that power into the Nether River. As the strength of the Nether River revived, the death power in the vampire apocalypse world would increase at an astonishing rate. At that point, the vampire apocalypse would truly be transformed into the Death Realm. However, strangely, Feng Heng noticed that his mission had not changed. He opened the mission details again. Mission name, Underworld Lord's Advancement. Mission difficulty, SSS. Mission type, Guidance Mission. Mission Guideline 1, Follow the Path of Empress Persephone. Mission requirements, Unify the Death Realm, 0 out of 1, and gain the recognition of the Dark Clan, 0 out of 1. Mission Guideline 2, The Lost Puzzle. Mission requirements, find more relevant clues and attempt to fill in the gaps. For now, Feng Heng pushed aside Mission Guideline 1. He had initially thought the missing piece of the puzzle referred to the Death Realm Orb. Now that the orb was successfully acquired, there was no new hint for the mission. What am I missing? Feng Heng lifted his head and looked again at the orb levitating at the center of the altar. The orb was slowly beginning to emit a brilliant glow. On either side of the altar, then wisps of mist began to rise. The outlines were still not fully condensing, and the wills of souls from various worlds couldn't yet be guided to their rightful worlds of allegiance. Just wait a bit longer. Once the orb completed its fusion, maybe there would be a new hint. Feng Heng flipped his wrist, and the Puno's teleportation scroll appeared in his palm. For now, it was best to return to the Undead Council and discuss the situation with the instructors there. Feng Heng felt a slight unease. If his guess was correct, and the disaster was also the seed of Ouroboros, then Mukingson might act against him at any moment. It was time to speed up and extract everything he could from the Death Realm. Oh, right, I almost forgot. Before leaving, Feng Heng suddenly remembered something. He turned back and waved his hand toward the Death Realm Orb. Whoosh! The dark golden protective layer surrounding the Death Realm Orb was quickly drawn into his hand. Buzz! Without the protective layer, the Death Realm Orb instantly unleashed a much stronger power. Feng Heng swiftly leaped backward to a safe distance. Although the vampire apocalypse was a safe world, Feng Heng still chose to retract the protective net and store it in his backpack, just in case someone tried to steal it. Besides, if there was ever another opportunity to go to the Holy Realm, he might need the shield to bring back the orb from there as well. At the Undead Council headquarters, the Death Realm Orb incident was a top-level secret. Many of the higher-ups at the Undead Council only knew the name Death Realm Orb. As for the details, Feng Heng had only briefed the 6 highest-ranking council members present. After hearing Feng Heng's report, the council fell into a brief silence. With the acquisition of the Death Realm Orb, the Undead Council had removed the biggest burden from their hearts. Even if the Death Realm were to be destroyed by the disaster, at least their pursuit of god-level necromancy could continue. Jiarji broke the silence and nodded. Feng Heng, well done. You've made a significant contribution. However, the Death Realm Orb is of immense importance, so the information must remain sealed. Yes, I agree. During this time, I plan to continue transporting key landmarks from the Death Realm and move as many of the Death Realm's original ecosystems as possible. Feng Heng nodded in agreement. The matter of the Death Realm Orb must remain confidential and low profile to avoid any unnecessary trouble. In addition, the Death Realm was vast and rich in resources, with many still yet to be moved. Taking advantage of the fact that the Holy Realm was still rebuilding its ruins and had no time to cause trouble, it was decided to move everything directly. Move as much as possible. Yes, the Undead Council will also fully assist in transporting the materials from the Death Realm. Jiarji looked at Feng Heng. Also, Feng Heng, due to your contribution to the Undead faction, the Council's high-level members have unanimously decided to grant you the qualification of a Council member. From now on, you will be the 7th member of our Undead Council. This. Feng Heng was taken aback. There were only 7 members in the entire Undead Council, including the president. Could he really be one of them? Isn't this a bit too soon? Feng Heng, you don't need to decline. Whether it's your contribution to the spread of necromancy or your own strength, you've already earned the qualification to become a council member. The only thing you lack is experience, and experience comes from more practice. GRG casually waved his hand and said, the Undead Council is different from the outside. If we always follow seniority and age, the younger ones would never have a chance. This matter is settled. Hint, you have become a council member of the Undead Council. Hint, you can now access some of the Undead Council's resources and qualify to enter the Undead Council's treasury. Hint, as a council member, you can issue missions and make calls within the Undead Council. Thank you for your trust, teachers. Feng Hang glanced at the mission description and nodded lightly. After becoming a council member, Feng Hang gained more access to various privileges. He could now use the Undead Council's contribution points to exchange for items of any level, as well as spend contribution points to issue missions. As for calling upon others, that didn't require any points, it was purely based on personal connections and reputation. Also, Feng Hang, GRG continued, you've reached the god level threshold in necromancy in under 3 years, advancing far too quickly. Your foundation is unstable, and your understanding of necromancy is still lacking. We believe that if you have the time, you should take a period of rest to calmly examine the power within you. This will be beneficial to your progress. Thank you for the guidance, teacher. Feng Hang nodded inwardly. GRG's words were not wrong. Feng Hang had been relying entirely on the abilities granted by his skills to fight, often overpowering enemies through sheer attributes. When facing opponents of the same level, he found it quite difficult to handle them. At that moment, he had obtained the Death Realm Orb, but he still hadn't found the path to advance further in necromancy. The next part of the mission had yet to trigger. He had been constantly fighting, with little time to calm down and properly focus on cultivation. Indeed, he needed some time to sort things out. It wasn't just the fusion of necromancy and vampires that needed organizing, even the advanced sacred study required some time to work through. What if he could find some clues about further advancement? But I'm worried about a disaster in the Death Realm. Well, the disaster creatures were severely wounded, so they won't wake up so quickly. For now, leave the rest to us. It's about time we old bones got moving. Then I'll be relying on you, teachers. Chapter 2801, New Discoveries 7 days later. Death Realm. On the grey-white bone wasteland, a flock of crows fluttered past towering bone trees. On the greyish-white bone wasteland, a flock of crows flew past towering bone trees. Feng Hang sat cross-legged before the altar. His wrinkled eyelids suddenly opened, and a dark gleam appeared in his murky pupils. Ho! As he exhaled a breath of stale air, Feng Hang's withered skin began to crack as if shedding, inch by inch. From the cracks, a jade-like glow emerged, and his silvery white hair rapidly turned black before the naked eye. When the last piece of dead skin fell to the ground, Feng Hang had returned to the appearance of a 20-year-old youth, and his eyes had regained their liveliness. It's done. Feng Hang spread his palm and gazed at the soul flame of the underworld dancing in his palm. The flame no longer stirred as it did before. Instead, it was docile, winding around his fingers like flowing water. After 7 days of silent meditation, the aura of the undead had completely merged with his meridians. At this moment, every pore was inhaling and exhaling pure nether energy, and the blood-red crystal deep within the soul flame grew increasingly luminous. Although there was no clear game hint, Feng Hang could already feel that his strength had increased by 30% compared to before he entered his seclusion. Hint, the vampire apocalypse has completed the construction of the reincarnation passage. Hint, the player's world will now guide and attract lost souls into the reincarnation passage. Hint, the underworld lake of the player has been replenished with energy. Hint, the player's current mission, the missing puzzle, has been completed. It's done? Feng Hang withdrew his gaze from the game prompt, a hint of surprise on his face. Sure enough, just as he had guessed. The Holy Realm relied on the power of faith to slowly advance. The Death Realm relied on the soul power released by the Soul Orb. It seemed he hadn't guessed wrong. The Death Realm Orb was indeed the missing piece for the complete advancement to God-level necromancy. As for the next step, unifying the Death Realm and gaining the recognition of the Dark Clan. Feng Hang stood up, gently massaging his wrist as he walked out of the underground cultivation room. This is going to be tough, he muttered to himself, pulling out a teleportation scroll and directly returning to the zombie apocalypse. With a flash of light, Feng Hang appeared in the zombie apocalypse teleportation hall. Mr. Feng. At the entrance of the teleportation hall, 2 guards nodded in unison toward Feng Hang. You've been waiting here the whole time? Yes, Mr. Feng. Supervisor Caillou said there was a major discovery and told us to wait here for 24 hours, one of the guards nodded. Supervisor Caillou said that once your seclusion ends, we should take you to him immediately. Feng Hang felt helpless. In the entire research institute, the only person who dared to say they would take him there was Caillou Kang. Speaking of which, Fang Heng had heard that Kaiyu King had recently used the genetic structure of the seed of Ouroboros to successfully develop a special potion. After consuming it, a person could remain alert and awake for an entire week. The downside was that they would need to spend the next day lying in bed for a full recovery. The potion was being prepared for a lab-wide rollout. Lead the way. Fang Heng thought that it might be related to the cocoon he'd asked Kaiyu King to research earlier, so he agreed and followed the guards to the laboratory to meet him. Inside the large research institute, Kaiyu King was discussing data with his subordinates and research personnel. Upon seeing Fang Heng enter through the glass door, he raised his hand to interrupt the meeting and signaled his subordinates to bring over some of the data. Fang Heng pushed the door open and entered. So, what's going on? You rushed me over here. Was there a major discovery? Yes, there is something. Let me explain it to you step by step. Kaiyu King nodded and said, first, the liquor transformation project. After these few days of modifications, along with sufficient energy and point supplies, all the zombies have been transformed into liquors. The original devouring body transformation was completed as planned with 1,000 modifications, and the remaining 36.3 million King of Gods points are reserved for emergencies. Well done. Fang Heng gave Kaiyu King a thumbs up. The second item is regarding the cocoon specimen you previously gave me. We conducted genetic research on it and discovered that it is related to the virus in your body. It belongs to a different source of viral fission. Kaiyu King stroked his chin and continued, we couldn't get in touch with you these past few days. Considering the potential for the specimen's main body to cause significant transformation effects on the zombie forms, greatly enhancing their abilities, I went ahead and conducted further research. Get to the conclusion. Based on the experimental results we've gathered so far, the main body of the specimen is a gene-altering substance. Fang Heng was starting to feel confused and asked, what do you mean? Polymorphism. It can fuse multiple different types of attributes and powers simultaneously. Kaiyu King looked at Fang Heng and said, the virus in your body has fused with zombie strength. Only mutated zombies and homologous powers can be enhanced, like before when you transformed zombies into liquors or the original devouring body to give them rebirth strength. But you couldn't fuse with other viral bodies. But with this cocoon, another viral effect can exist alongside the zombie body within you. As Kaiyu King was speaking, a staff member entered the research room, carrying a metal tray. Supervisor Kaiyu, Mr. Fang. The staff member greeted them and nodded to both Kaiyu King and Fang Heng before placing the tray in front of Kaiyu King. Kaiyu King glanced at the injected potion on the tray and nodded at Fang Heng. I took the initiative to make the corresponding potion. The preliminary theoretical experiment passed, but as you know, we lack real-world testing, so we'll have to let you try it yourself. What do you mean? You want me to be the guinea pig? Theoretically, there shouldn't be any problems. Considering your special physique, we made it a bit rough, and many negative effects weren't removed. But it shouldn't affect you. In my judgment, the worst-case scenario is that you'll just need to rest in bed for a day or two. Jiziobo, standing nearby, couldn't help but shrink his neck when he heard Kaiyu King's words. Good grief, even Brother Fang would have to lie in bed for 2 days with his physique. Wouldn't someone else just die from blood loss instantly? Fine. Fang Heng shrugged and picked up the syringe. Since Kaiyu King had said there was no problem, it surely wouldn't be an issue. Hint, the player has found an item unknown injection. Fang Heng rolled up his sleeve and directly injected the needle into his vein. Hint, the player has entered an internal bleeding state. The player's undead effect activates. The player's internal bleeding state is being repaired. Hint, the player's current adaptability has changed. Hint, the player is affected by a mixed unknown toxin. The player's HP has decreased by 12,923 points. The player's undead effect activates. The player's internal bleeding state is being repaired. Hint, the player's physique is higher than 800 points. The player is immune to 27 types of low-level toxins. Hint, the player is currently in a partial willpower chaos state. The player's willpower attribute is over 300, and the player is exempt from this state. Fang Heng glanced at the game prompts and warnings scrolling across his retina, then shifted his gaze to Kaiyu King. You, damn guy. The poison carefully crafted by others probably isn't as toxic as yours. Chapter 2802, Modification. Kaiyu King didn't understand the meaning in Fang Heng's gaze and asked, how does it feel? Fang Heng shook his head and said, it's fine, doesn't feel much. It seemed there were many potion game hints, but upon closer inspection, it became clear that all negative effects were completely cleared within 3 seconds. That's good, it looks like my experimental data isn't off by much. Saying this, Kaiyu King gave another glance to a researcher. The researcher immediately walked up to the two of them, holding a tray. Kaiyu King carefully put on gloves, used alloy tweezers to pick up the cocoon from the metal tray, and brought it closer to Fang Heng's rolled-up sleeve. Kai. When the cocoon was less than 20 centimeters away from Fang Heng's arm, Fang Heng's right arm suddenly changed. His skin suddenly ripped open, revealing a hole, from which small, bright red, flesh-like growths extended. The growths couldn't spread too far, but they seemed to have an intense craving for the cocoon. The researchers present stared at Fang Heng, their eyes full of shock. Fang Heng was also a bit surprised, looking at his shoulder. "Don't be nervous, this is a normal phenomenon. It just happens to show that you and the cocoon share the same origin virus," Caillou Yaokang said, his tone becoming more serious as he continued to push the cocoon closer to Fang Heng. Fang Heng thought to himself, "Normal my ass." He had used the cocoon near his body before, but nothing like this had ever happened. It had something to do with the potion he had drunk earlier. Kai. The cocoon moved closer to the torn muscle gap on his arm until it was completely swallowed by his body. The wound on his arm quickly healed. Caillou Yaokang placed the tweezers back onto the assistant's tray and focused on Fang Heng's physical changes. 2 full minutes passed, and seeing that Fang Heng was still standing there unharmed, he couldn't help but frown and ask, "How do you feel?" Fang Heng lifted his arm again and examined it carefully. It felt as if the cocoon had completely fused into his body, leaving no trace of change, as if it had always been a part of him. "It doesn't seem like anything's happened." As soon as the words left his mouth, a game hint appeared. Hint: the player has successfully absorbed and fused the seed of Ouroboros. Hint: the player has currently awakened a hidden ability of the seed of Ouroboros. Hint: the player's talent skill has changed. Hint: due to the absorption and fusion of seed of Ouroboros, level 2, the player's current ability of the seed of Ouroboros has been upgraded to level 3. Fang Heng's brow furrowed tightly. This was bad. With this game hint, he was now even more certain. He was the seed of Ouroboros. And Zai was likely his cultivator. Fang Heng scratched his hair and carefully looked at the description. There were no other changes to his talent skills, except for an additional branch with the extra boost from the seed of Ouroboros. Talent boost, seed of Ouroboros, level 3, talent boost description, all basic attributes of the player +3. The player's zombie clone can now acquire an additional external modification ability. External modification ability? What was this? Fang Heng furrowed his brow slightly, looked up at Caillou Yaokang, and asked, "The game hint says my zombie clone got an external modification ability. Do you know what it is?" Caillou Yaokang stroked his chin, thinking for a moment, then said, "It seems like my prediction was pretty close. To put it simply, you can think of it as your zombie clone being able to undergo an additional modification. For example, the licker, where bone wings extend from its spine, allowing it to achieve short-distance flight." Flight ability? Jiziobo, who had been listening nearby, couldn't help but exclaim, "Can it really do that?" In Jiziobo's eyes, the licker was already terrifying enough, and with flight ability added to it, wouldn't it be invincible? Caillou Yaokang calmly glanced at Jiziobo and continued, "Theoretically, it's entirely possible, but the premise is that it must share the same origin as the cocoon virus. Flight ability isn't included in that list. We've conducted some tests, and so far, we've found only a few kinds of compatible abilities from the available biological materials. The current available additional abilities are spiked armor and acidic bodily fluids. Spiked armor can slightly increase defensive ability and provide some damage reflection when subjected to physical attacks. Acidic bodily fluids cause high-efficiency extra damage when there are destructive wounds and provide a corrosion effect when biting." As Caillou Yaokang explained these 2 additional skills, the game hints appeared in Fang Heng's retina. Hint: the player's research institute additional ability options acidic fluid, spiked armor. Hint: the player can choose to add, but the additional effect will not be retained after the zombie clone's death. The player may also choose to consume additional King of Gods points to have the effect remain after the zombie clone's death. Fang Heng stroked his chin, beginning to understand. It seemed that the cocoon wasn't enhancing his strength, but rather the special abilities of the zombie clone he controlled. If you were to make an analogy, it was somewhat similar to the disaster creatures. Fang Heng looked up and asked, "When can we start the fusion process?" "We can start anytime, but the fusion transformation status will consume energy, and the solidified fusion will likely consume more as well." "So?" Fang Heng thought for a moment. At the moment, the spiked armor and acidic fluid skills didn't seem to significantly increase the combat strength of his zombie clone army. In fact, the solidification effect would require even more time and King of Gods points resources to implement. It seemed a bit of a waste to just pick one skill for now. Better to wait and find a more suitable ability. Fang Heng even began to think. Since Suzu and Mukinkson were both cultivators of the seed of Ouroboros, would killing Mukinkson drop the same cocoon? If he absorbed it, could his talent boost continue to increase? Perhaps he could gain more fusion options? Forget it, don't think too much. Mu Kingson was incredibly powerful. Last time, they had to gather the power of demonic seeds and a vast amount of strength and holy realm power, accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years of the power of faith, just to barely defeat her. Without other sources of strength, relying solely on the everlasting moon wouldn't be enough to take her down. Unaware of Fang Heng's thoughts, Kaiyu Yaokang nodded. We'll continue analyzing samples from various known world creatures and hope to find more suitable special abilities to enhance zombie creatures. Alright, thank you for your hard work. As for the last matter, Kaiyu Yaokang nodded toward another assistant nearby, who quickly brought over another metal tray. Fang Heng looked at the black crystal on the tray in surprise. Is this a soul crystal? Yes, this was discovered a few days ago in the vampire apocalypse world. We tried various methods to cultivate it, but we couldn't manage it. However, it suddenly appeared in the vampire apocalypse. We suspect the soul crystal's formation is related to a special soul energy field, but the exact ritual or usage is unclear. Continuing research may not lead to much progress and would just waste time. Chapter 2803, Crystal. I understand. So, regarding cultivation? Accelerating cultivation won't be a problem, Kaiyu Yaokang replied. As the aura in the vampire apocalypse world intensifies, the speed of soul crystal generation will also increase significantly. By the way, the one you're holding is one that we cultivated in the vampire apocalypse world. That's great. Fang Heng felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The Dark Clan had always been reluctant to leave the Death Realm. Aside from their long-held beliefs, a significant reason for this was the Soul Crystal. The Dark Clan couldn't survive without the Soul Crystals. Now that the Soul Crystal issue was solved, it would be much easier to persuade at least part of the Dark Clan to come to the vampire apocalypse world. First, deceive a few of them, then gradually convince more. As Fang Heng was thinking, a sudden flash of insight struck him. Wait a minute, Kaiyu Yaokang, you said the soul crystal's formation is related to a soul energy field? When did this energy field appear? Did it start after the altar orb was activated? Yes, roughly 7 days ago, the energy field started to gradually form, Kaiyu Yaokang confirmed. Fang Heng squinted slightly, his mind racing as a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Interesting. It turned out that the soul crystals needed the existence of the Death Realm orb to function properly. How convenient. Now that the soul crystals had been transported to the vampire apocalypse world, wouldn't this mean that the Death Realm would no longer have any soul crystals? Just as he had been worrying about how to complete the Underworld Lord's advancement mission, Kaiyu Yaokang had just handed him the perfect opportunity. The Death Realm. At the entrance of the Blackstone Mountain teleportation passage, Kotal and the accompanying clan members were gathered, working together with Fang Heng's zombie clones to transport materials. During this time, the morale of the Dark Clan had been extremely low. Since 7 days ago, the entire Death Realm underwent drastic changes. The aura of the Death Realm was steadily depleting. The Dark Clan had discovered that the environment they relied on for survival had drastically changed. The strength of the Death Realm was continuously waning, and even the soul crystals, unique to the Death Realm, had begun to stop growing. The situation had worsened drastically in just 7 days. Even the soul crystals that had been stored in the past were starting to shrink. Without the continuous supply of soul crystals, the Dark Clan would not only be unable to fight against disaster creatures, but even their survival would be at risk. With the shortage of soul crystals and the weakening aura of death in the Death Realm, the defense line the Dark Clan had established against the disaster creatures was now in a dire and inferior position. The Dark Clan didn't understand the true cause of these anomalies and mostly believed that it was related to the spread of the disaster. With the front line losing ground and retreating, a sense of pessimism had spread throughout the Dark Clan. Just as this wave of hopelessness began to take over, Kotal's eyes brightened as the light from the teleportation passage appeared. He led a few trusted subordinates forward and greeted Fang Heng respectfully. Mr. Fang Heng, you've returned. Fang Heng cupped his hands in return and said, Kotal, we've been relying on your help these days. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to transport materials so smoothly. Kotal had indeed been reliable. Over the past few days, it was thanks to Kotal's clan that various buildings in the Death Realm had been disassembled by Fang Heng's zombie clones and continuously transported back to the vampire apocalypse world. Now, Kotal's clan had already begun moving materials from Dragon Grave Mountain. Fang Heng thought for a moment, planning how he would later convince Kotal's clan to help take care of Dragon Grave Mountain in his new Death Realm. What's wrong? Fang Heng raised his head and noticed that Kotal seemed troubled. Kotal hesitated for a moment, sighed inwardly, and said, Mr. Fang Heng, you may have heard, but during your absence, we ran into a huge problem. Kotal didn't know the exact cause of the crisis. When the crisis first occurred, the first person he thought of was Fang Heng. It was a strange intuition. At that moment, Kotal believed that only Feng Heng could help them. Now, Kotal was anxious. The upper echelons of the Dark Clan were in a state of panic. Feng Heng's heart sank, and he asked, "Has the disaster mutated again?" "No, it's the soul crystals and the aura of the Death Realm that are changing. We've run into a huge problem." Kotal quickly explained the recent mutations in the Death Realm. As Feng Heng listened to Kotal's account, he suddenly felt a sense of unease. What a coincidence. The changes started 7 days ago. It was exactly when he moved the Death Realm orb from the Death Realm. As he had suspected, without the Death Realm orb, the Death Realm would change. But he hadn't expected the changes to happen so quickly. Feng Heng hesitated for a moment, then decided to keep this information to himself. If the news leaked out, there would be trouble. The Dark Clan might demand that he return the Death Realm orb, and that would create unnecessary conflict. There was no need to create tension with the Dark Clan. In fact, when Feng Heng took various things from the Death Realm earlier, most of the Dark Clan members were already dissatisfied. The Dark Clan's 4 great empires were generally wary of outsiders, and only the Vani Empire had been closer to him. Kotal stood quietly beside him, noticing Feng Heng deep in thought, a bad premonition rising in his heart. He softly asked, "Mr. Feng Heng?" Feng Heng raised his head and looked at Kotal. "By the way, Kotal, listening to you, I just realized that I haven't formally invited you yet. What are your thoughts? Would you and your people be willing to join me in the new world I'm establishing?" Kotal, hearing Feng Heng's words, felt a pang of bitterness in his heart. He shook his head. What was going on? At a time like this, was Feng Heng still thinking about that? Without the Soul Stone, the Dark Clan would be facing extermination. Was it really the time to drag his people, who were on the brink of destruction, to a new world? "Mr. Feng Heng," Kotal said, his voice heavy with concern, "even if we are willing to follow you to the new world, without the Soul Stone, the Dark Clan's combat strength will drastically decrease. Our survival will be at great risk." "Kotal," Feng Heng interrupted, locking his gaze on Kotal. "I'm asking about your intentions, first and foremost." Kotal sighed, realizing there was no easy way around this. He had anticipated this moment for some time. Most of his people were hesitant to join the new world. But he knew deep down that if they stayed in the Death Realm, they would likely be consumed by the spreading disaster. What other choice was there? They could choose freely. With a resigned sigh, Kotal decided to be open with Feng Heng. "Mr. Feng Heng, there's still considerable resistance within the clan. I'll continue trying to persuade my people, but given the current situation, I can assure you that I'll be able to convince some of them to follow you to the new world. As for the others, I can't guarantee I'll be able to sway them. And what about you? What do you think? Are you willing to go to the new world with me?" Kotal nodded without hesitation. "I understand. Your words alone are enough for me. Without your support, I wouldn't know what to do," Feng Heng said, patting Kotal's shoulder with a faint smile. "Let me share some good news with you, too." "Good news?" "Thanks to your help, the concentration of death aura in the new world has increased significantly. And as a result," Feng Heng paused for effect, then added, "we've successfully cultivated soul stones in the new world." Chapter 2804, Cultivation Awe. "What did you say?" Kotal was startled and immediately looked at Feng Heng, his eyes filled with disbelief. "The soul stone. It's something my research institute recently cultivated. Right now, the level is still quite low, so it's almost identical to a normal soul stone in effect." Feng Heng said as he pulled a cultivated soul stone from his backpack and tossed it toward Kotal. "The production is still limited, but it'll increase soon. I'll arrange for a shipment of soul stones to be sent over to make sure the Dark Clan's combat strength isn't affected due to the shortage." Kotal was stunned. This was such a coincidence. He stared at Feng Heng in a daze, feeling a flicker of doubt in his heart. Could it be? Was Feng Heng sent by the Underworld Lord to save the Dark Clan? Feng Heng noticed Kotal's dazed expression and laughed heartily, patting Kotal on the shoulder. "Haha, this is all thanks to you. If you hadn't been helping me with the material transport under so much pressure, we wouldn't have been able to cultivate the soul stone so quickly. You're truly the savior of the Dark Clan. Don't worry. Even though the soul stone production is still low, I'll prioritize supplying them to your people." Kotal was deeply grateful and immediately nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Feng Heng." Hint: the player has gained Kotal's favorability rating. Kotal's clan favorability rating has reached the required value. Hint: the player has gained the Dark Clan's favorability rating. Hint: the player's current mission: Underworld Lord's advancement. Mission requirements: Dark Clan recognition must reach 0.4%. This was the first time a hint had appeared. The Dark Clan's recognition of outsiders was low. Even though Feng Heng had done quite a bit for them, the recognition was still only 0.4%. Feng Heng observed the game hint and rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The Underworld Lord's advancement mission was divided into 3 main parts. One of them, finding the Death Realm Orb, had already been completed. The remaining 2 were gaining the Dark Clan's recognition and unifying the Death Realm. Perhaps I can take advantage of this opportunity to complete the recognition of the Dark Clan. The Dark Clan. The high-ranking leaders of the 4 great empires gathered for a critical meeting. Since the outbreak of the disaster, this had already been the 9th gathering of the high-level officials from the 4 great empires. The crisis, however, wasn't caused by the disaster, but by internal issues. The situation is dire. It is suspected that the rapid depletion of the soul stones is linked to the reduction in the aura of the Death Realm. Currently, only the Marby Cavern region can gather the Death Aura due to its terrain. Inside the cavern, there are still some soul crystals being produced, but their production rate is dropping significantly. We must come up with a solution quickly. A heavy gloom hung over the meeting. A solution? If it were that easy, they wouldn't all be here waiting idly. Originally, the disaster's strength had decreased, and with the addition of Fang Heng's Bone Dragon army and humans, the Dark Clan had begun to stabilize their front lines and even started planning a counterattack. But no one had anticipated that the Soulstone issue would arise first. Let's take it step by step. My suggestion is to prioritize the supply of soul crystals from the Holy Realm to the front lines. The lack of soul crystals had greatly weakened the combat strength of the Dark Clan on the front lines, making it increasingly difficult to resist the disaster. As the disaster spread, the Dark Clan's territory was shrinking, and it was becoming clear that they were facing a deadlock. What was originally estimated to hold off the disaster for at least 3 months had already begun to collapse within less than a month. And what about the other tribes? Are we just going to let them perish? The limited resources were nowhere near enough to satisfy the needs of all the remaining 4 great empires. Tension filled the council hall, and an atmosphere of open conflict began to arise. The ruler of the Gab Empire, the only one with any soulstone production remaining, had become the center of attention. All the empires brought forward their offers, hoping to exchange materials for the precious soul crystals. The voices of disagreement grew louder by the minute. The ruler of the Gab Empire, however, had no intention of raising his price. After all, with a great enemy at hand, any success or failure would affect them all. Suddenly, a guard rushed in and whispered something in the ear of Renee, the acting ruler of the Vanya Empire. After listening, Renee's expression shifted slightly. Is it true? It has been confirmed. Renee suddenly stood up and nodded. Everyone, I have urgent matters to attend to. I'll leave for now. Huh? What was going on? The remaining high-ranking leaders of the empires exchanged confused glances. Just moments ago, they were heatedly discussing how to secure more shares of the soul stones. Now, suddenly, she was leaving? Had she given up her share? The others were puzzled, and just then, a guard hurried to Clayton Empire's king and whispered a few words in his ear. The king of Clayton Empire's expression also shifted several times. Everyone, I have some urgent matters as well. I'll take my leave. The remaining 2 emperors and their ministers exchanged glances, both looking bewildered. What was going on? They had just been engaged in heated bidding for more soulstone shares. Why had they suddenly disappeared? The 2 remaining emperors exchanged glances, both sensing that something was amiss. Ha ha, I just remembered that the empire has some matters to deal with as well. Since the other 2 emperors are no longer here, let's call it a day. We'll continue the discussion once everyone is present. Yes, that's a good idea. The king of the Gab Empire nodded. Though he knew something was off, he thought to himself that as long as they had soul crystals in hand and the mines were still under their control, nothing would go wrong. Eventually, all the other emperors and their ministers left. Half an hour later, a guard hurried back to report, his head lowered. Your Majesty, there is news that all the empire rulers are heading toward the Blackstone Mountain Range. What? The Blackstone Mountain Range? What was going on there? Hadn't the Kotal tribe been helping humans deliver materials there recently? The king of Gab Empire felt a bit displeased at the thought. However, considering that humans had indeed helped them in the battle against the disaster, he decided to turn a blind eye. The guard continued, we've learned that humans have discovered the method to create soul crystals in the New World. The first batch of soul crystals is about to be delivered from the New World. What? The New World? What's that? At this moment, a priest from one of the empires stepped forward and explained tactfully, the concept of New World was recently proposed by humans. Given that the war with the disaster could potentially destroy the Death Realm entirely, humans have been transporting materials from the Death Realm to a New World, attempting to replicate and build a new Death Realm. The guard added, yes, the rumors say that humans have successfully cultivated soul crystals in the New World. The king of Gab Empire froze. This was unbelievable. He had heard similar reports before but had brushed them off as nonsense. To create a new Death Realm? By simply moving a few Death Realm stones over? That was absurd. But now, their Death Realm's soul crystals were depleting, and the New World had managed to cultivate them? It was all upside down. Let's go. Take people with us and see for ourselves. The king of Gab Empire was furious. His subordinates had failed to notify him sooner, and now they were the last to hear the news. Chapter 2805, Recognition. The king of Gab Empire hurriedly led his subordinates toward the Blackstone mountain range, and it had already been more than an hour by the time they arrived. The mountain peaks were visible from a long distance, and the king saw the other three empire kings from afar. By coincidence, 2 hours after the meeting had ended, they all met again at the summit of Blackstone Mountain. Ha ha ha, we all heard there was something going on, but who would have thought it was such a coincidence that we all ran into each other here? The empire kings laughed heartily as they greeted each other. Don't mind telling me, what's the situation right now? Renee glanced at him and said, Feng Heng has just returned to the New World and is trying to transport a batch of soulstone materials back. Upon hearing Feng Heng's name, the empire kings already had some idea in their minds. In the war against the disaster, if there was one unique force that could gain a real advantage, it would likely be the Bone Dragon Knight Legion controlled by Feng Heng. The king of Gab Empire pondered for a moment and said, I've heard that the New World plan was proposed and developed by Feng Heng, but it hasn't really received the approval of the 4 great empires. There's no point in discussing that now. When the outsiders were transporting materials, you didn't approve, but you didn't oppose it either, did you? Humphrey, don't get so worked up. The king of the Gab Empire scoffed and continued, I just want to remind everyone that these outsiders have now taken control of our lifeline. Be careful, they might have ulterior motives. When the time comes, I hope you don't trade your interests for temporary gains. Hearing this, the high-ranking officials of the empire all became alert. Indeed, that was the case. If Feng Heng were to use the soulstone as leverage, how should they respond? The king of the Gab Empire looked around at the others. If he truly demands an outrageous price, our Gab Empire will never surrender easily. You all should think about the worst-case scenario first. When that time comes, unity will be key. We mustn't let ourselves become pawns for the outsiders. Indeed, it's just a new world. If they really push us to the limit, we can always go to the New World together. The king of Clayton Empire pondered and nodded slightly. He shared the same sentiment. When it came to matters of life and death, if Feng Heng proposed some exchange of benefits, the empire would reluctantly accept it. But if the other party made outrageous demands, if things didn't go well, they would forcibly take the soul crystal back. King Renee shook her head and said, Everyone, let's wait and see. The situation might not be as bad as you think. King Renee, you're too merciful. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but you're more suited for leading battles. You don't understand human nature. If such a choice were in front of you, would you be willing to give it up? Just as they were talking, a faint light appeared at the teleportation passage. The high-ranking officials of the empire stopped talking and looked toward the passage. They saw zombie creatures carrying various sized boxes out of the teleportation passage, neatly placing them in an open area outside the passage. All eyes were on the boxes. Soon, Feng Heng emerged from the passage. Huh? So many people? Feng Heng noticed a circle of people gathered outside the teleportation passage and was surprised to see Renee, the feudal lord, among them. Mr. Feng Heng. Beside him, Kodal quickly walked up and whispered a few words in Feng Heng's ear. So that was the case. The entire Death Realm was facing a crisis due to the depletion of underworld crystal ores. Hearing that there were soul crystals available, everyone rushed over to check the situation. Feng Heng already had a plan in mind and gently raised his hand. The zombie clones wobbled toward the boxes and began opening them. When they saw that the boxes were filled to the brim with underworld crystals, the people of Kodal's tribe couldn't help but gasp in amazement, their eyes flickering with excitement. The kings of the various empires and their entourages also looked on with grave expressions. It seemed to be real. This was unbelievable. Humans. How did they manage to do this? Renee looked at Feng Heng with a surprised expression. Just recently, she had discussed the issue of soul crystals with Feng Heng, and now, in such a short time, he had found a solution. At this moment, presenting the boxes filled with soul crystals was far more convincing than any words. The kings of the various empires and their high-ranking officials were quickly processing what they had seen, trying to figure out how to persuade Feng Heng to continue supplying them with soul crystals at the lowest possible cost. Kings, Feng Heng said, bowing slightly. Thank you for the continued support of the empires, which allowed me to transport some materials into the New World. This enabled the cultivation of soul crystals there. Currently, the production is low, but we will continue to cultivate more. It won't be long before we can meet the entire Death Realm's demand. For now, we only have this batch of crystals. Let's discuss how to distribute them, and I won't interfere. You. The king of Gab Empire, hearing Feng Heng's words, looked at him uncertainly, a suspicious expression on his face. He asked, "Are you saying that you are willing to give these to us for free? With no additional conditions?" "Of course." "Huh?" The high-ranking officials from the various empires exchanged glances, all of them somewhat incredulous. What an opportunity to demand a high price. Was humanity really giving up so easily? They had already prepared themselves mentally to shed some blood, even gearing up to potentially clash with Feng Heng if necessary. But had they overestimated things? Feng Heng smiled and looked at the group. His thoughts were clear. The Dark Clan's power in the entire Death Realm was still formidable. They had been able to resist the disaster for so long, and the Dark Clan had played a major role in that resistance. Moreover, he had heard from Renee that each empire still had some hidden treasures they had yet to bring out. They wouldn't fight to the death until the very last moment. Now was not the time to go head-to-head with the Dark Clan. The difficulty of unifying the Death Realm with force was too high. Even if they did manage to unify the Dark Clan, they wouldn't be able to unify the entire Death Realm. It was better to let the Dark Clan continue to entangle with the disaster for a while longer. Perhaps, one day, when the remaining Dark Clan forces in the Death Realm were completely wiped out, and the Dark Clan's full mission completion rate was achieved, that would be the right moment for him to take over the Death Realm completely and finish his final task. Feng Heng, "Thank you, Renee," the king said, looking at him. She nodded first. "We had an agreement, and the Vani Empire has already issued a call to arms. The first batch of 2,000 will be gathered and will travel to the New World with Kotal tomorrow." Feng Heng thought to himself that King Renee was reliable. It wasn't in vain that he had spent so much time improving his favorability rating. With the first batch of Dark Clan members entering the New World and discovering its benefits, word of mouth would spread, and more Dark Clan members would eventually join the New World. "Alright, I'll make sure to take good care of them," Feng Heng said as he glanced at the game prompt. Hint: the player has gained Dark Clan recognition. The player has gained favorability with the empires. The player's current Dark Clan recognition, 3.22%, only 3.22%. No rush. Feng Heng quietly reassured himself. Once the news of the Soul Stone spread, his recognition would gradually increase. Chapter 2806, A Threat. Meanwhile, in another part of the Death Realm, Mu Kingxin floated above the Nether River, gazing at the distant location of the Blackstone Mountain Range, her brows tightly furrowed. Feng Heng. The last time she saw Feng Heng, his strength was indeed not weak. But killing Suzy? Impossible. With just his strength, he definitely couldn't have done it. Something special must have happened. Additionally, the aura in the Death Realm had been greatly diminishing recently, and even the strength of the Nether River was rapidly weakening, causing the recovery speed of Proust, who was submerged in the Nether River, to slow down. The estimated time for his full recovery and awakening had been significantly pushed back. Feng Heng. Was it you who did this too? Mu Kingxin muttered to herself, a hint of wariness appearing in her eyes. Outside the game. In the library of the Myriad Worlds. Feng Heng stepped out of the game and lazily stretched his body. After distributing the first batch of soul stones to the Death Realm, his work there had finally come to a temporary pause. Speaking of which, besides obtaining the Death Realm Orb and advancing to the Great Sage rank, the biggest gain from this trip was the enhancement of the Divine Weapon Divine Prank. The Holy Weapon Divine Prank had now gained a new identity that made it immune to all tracking and probing abilities. It also allowed Feng Heng to act under the guise of Fang Bei. With this, he could now freely move in the real world without worrying about being tracked by the Central Federation. Time to go out and have some fun. For now, in the game world, Feng Heng would casually grind while dealing with the disaster creatures, earning points and digging away at the corners of the Death Realm's walls. He would subtly influence the Dark Clan members over time. As the new world was gradually established, more and more Dark Clan members would be drawn into it. As for those who remained stubbornly and resolutely resisting until the end, one could only express admiration for them. But the Death Realm still needed to be reclaimed. The enemies were Proust, who had fought against them before, and Mu Kingxin, who had not intervened at the time. His current strength wasn't enough, so he would have to keep finding ways to improve. Where should he focus his efforts? Hell, perhaps? Feng Heng could already sense that his strength was gradually approaching the level of jealousy. He was now almost 100% certain that he was also a seed of Ouroboros. And Zai Zai was his cultivator. That meant Zai Zai probably wouldn't want to kill him. If she did, with her ability, he'd likely be dead by now. Of course, when facing someone at Zai Zai's level, he still had to be fully prepared. As Feng Heng pondered, he had just opened the door to his room. Gu Qingzhi stood at the doorway, and when she saw the door suddenly open, her shoulders flinched. She hurriedly hid her hands behind her back and lowered her head, and a hint of panic flashed in her eyes. "Qingzhi? You looking for me? Zzz. The phantom shadow rat leapt from Gu Qingzu's shoulder, landing on Feng Heng's shoulder, affectionately rubbing against his neck. Gu Qingzu adjusted her hair and, when she raised her head again, her usual composure had returned. She asked, "So? Have you dealt with the matters in the game?" Lately, Feng Heng had been holed up in the Death Realm, completely out of sight. Even though they were both in the same luxurious room, it had been over a month since they had seen each other. "Hey, ran into a bit of trouble, but it's mostly sorted out." "You changed the fragrance?" Feng Heng sniffed the air, looking at her in curiosity. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine." Gu Qingzu looked at him, then continued, "By the way, I came to say goodbye. I'm leaving. Now. So soon?" Feng Heng was taken aback by the sudden news and furrowed his brow. "Has the Federation lifted the tracking on us?" Gu Qingzu didn't answer directly. She just stared at him intently. Feng Heng touched his cheek. "What's wrong? How long has it been since you've been online?" "Huh?" Sigh. Gu Qingzu let out a soft sigh, clearly feeling helpless. "Come with me." She spoke as she walked toward the table in the living room. "There's been a lot happening while you've been in the game. Let me summarize for you briefly. The barrier between the game and reality is gradually being torn apart. Game entrances are appearing frequently all around the world, monsters are invading our world, and the world's stage seals are gradually unlocking, along with..." She paused as she opened her laptop and logged into the official game website. The screen soon displayed a page, and then she continued, "From the looks of it, it's very likely that the Federation's first civil war will break out between the Western District Federation and the North District Federation." "Huh? A civil war? Is it really escalating this far?" Feng Heng was genuinely surprised by the news and quickly leaned in to look at the information on the screen. The friction and division between the four major federations had been growing over the years, with countless threats to cut ties and frequent calls for civil war, but most of those were just empty threats. But now, it seemed like they were actually going to follow through. The official website was already flooded with discussion threads. Feng Heng clicked on a trending post to check the event details. After a while, he carefully read through the original post and then looked up at Gu Qingzu. The so-called Federation civil war was still a bit of a stretch, at least the various federations hadn't resorted to actual combat, but the rhetoric was already very clear. The entire Western District Federation and the Northern District Federation had locked down their border, cutting off most civilian flights and rail services. The cause of the issue was a high-tier special project named the Star Map, which had provoked strong dissatisfaction among the other district federations. 2 days ago, the Northern Federation issued an ultimatum, demanding that the Western District Federation cease the project within 7 days, or they would take all necessary measures, including the use of force, to compel the Western District Federation to stop. The Central Federation had done its best to mediate in the middle but with little effect. Feng Heng looked on, feeling somewhat confused. "What is the Star Map project?" Gu Qingzu took the mouse from Feng Heng's hand, opened an image on the webpage, and explained, "The Star Map project, according to data released by the Western District Federation, is essentially about constructing an aerial barrier above our planet. This special barrier can effectively slow down the speed of game space anomalies and, on a cosmic scale, precisely locate the game's black fog, allowing for early warning of game invasion events." Feng Heng looked at the Star Map blueprint and the leaked images displayed on the screen, feeling a slight stir in his heart. How strange. The structure of the building in the image looked somewhat familiar, like he had seen it somewhere before. Ah, right. The transition prism. From the diagram, the architectural design closely resembled the transition prisms used by the spawn creatures in the game. So, the Western District Federation obtained this blueprint through a spawn-related mission line. Chapter 2807, Turmoil. Had the Western District Federation teamed up with the spawns? Feng Heng thought to himself, then looked up and said, "Sounds promising. The Star Map project could protect the people, so why would the Central Federation and the North District Federation oppose it?" "The North District Federation claims that the origin is questionable," Gu Qingzu explained. "The so-called Star Map project by the Western District Federation was obtained from an alien species, something beyond our current technological level, and we know very little about that species. Trusting them is out of the question. The North District Federation believes that with our current technology, we cannot control such a weapon. They argue that if the Star Map barrier is established, it's uncertain whether it could slow down the speed at which the game invades the real world. But what's certain is that the entire world would be exposed to attacks from an unknown extraterrestrial species. Once the Star Map barrier is fully established, the Western District Federation and the alien life forms would essentially have a button to press, and with a single push, the entire world could be destroyed. But the Western District Federation disagrees and claims that the Central Federation has no right to interfere with the Western District Federation's establishment of self-protection measures." Fang Heng's expression became serious. Currently, the Southern District Federation and North District Federation are the main regions opposing this. The Central Federation is doing its best to mediate and ease the tension between them. Also, since last month, black fog zones from the game have gradually appeared all over the world. The Federation has started investigating these zones, and it's been confirmed that many creatures that broke through from the game are gathering in these black fog zones, which are gradually invading the human world. The Western District Federation claims that the rapid spread of the black fog zones forced them to accelerate the Star Map project to protect the people. However, the North District Federation argues that it's the initiation of the Star Map project that significantly accelerated the mutations caused by the game. Fang Heng scratched his head. Good grief, both sides had their arguments, and Fang Heng wasn't sure which one was right. What about the Eastern Federation? Any reaction? The old foxes over there have remained calm, they haven't made any public statements yet. Gukingzu briefly explained the current situation between the different federations and continued, the Central Federation is currently overwhelmed by the black fog from the game. It's a good opportunity for me to investigate the demi-human tribe's research experiments. I plan to go to the Central Federation myself and investigate what they're up to. Fang Heng thought for a moment, then looked up and said, alright, I'll go with you. Hold on, I'm going to infiltrate and investigate, not to cause a scene. What would you be doing there? Gukingzu pressed her hand on Fang Heng's shoulder to push him back into his seat. I'll handle it myself. The issue with the demi-human tribe needs to be solved by us. Fang Heng gazed at her. Indeed. If it was just an investigation, there was little he could do to help, and if nothing significant turned up, it might just waste time. Fang Heng didn't insist, nodding in agreement. Alright, be careful along the way. If you run into any trouble, contact me anytime. Same to you. We'll meet again soon. Fang Heng watched as Gukingzu left with her suitcase, slowly pulling his gaze back as she disappeared. He then reopened his laptop to check again. Currently, black fog from the game was gradually spreading around the world, and many low-tier and mid-tier game monsters were entering the real world through the black fog zones. For ordinary people, dealing with game creatures was extremely difficult. A significant portion of the Federation's elite forces had been diverted to handle the monster invasions. If someone wanted to strike at the Federation, now seemed like a perfect time. Dedede. His first thought was that it was Old Black. That guy was very good at keeping things secret, always calling from an unknown number. Fang Heng noticed the phone ringing suddenly. Unknown caller? His first thought was that it was Old Black. That guy was very good at keeping things secret, always calling from an unknown number. Hello? Fang Heng. The voice on the other end of the line was sweet and venomous, like a snake flicking its tongue. How's the game going? Are you having fun? Fang Heng's pupils shrank at the familiar voice, and he fell silent. Zai. He had been planning to find her, but she had contacted him first. What? Did you think that just because you blocked me, I wouldn't be able to find you? Zai. Why choose me? There was a brief silence on the other end, and her voice took on a lazy tone. Not bad, looks like you've figured out quite a bit. The death of Suzu wasn't entirely a coincidence, huh? So, how much do you know? What do you mean? The seed of Ouroboros? Fang Heng tried to probe Zai, replying with a question of his own. Or is it the cultivator? You even remembered that? I'm impressed. You're right. I'm your cultivator, and you are the seed of Ouroboros that I've cultivated. Fang Heng hadn't expected Zai to answer so straightforwardly, and he immediately followed up with another question. So, you were also the one who collaborated with the jealousy demonic seed to restrict the other demonic seeds, right? Correct. Looks like you and I knew what we were getting into. Well done. Zai's voice had a touch of admiration. So, tell me, what else do you want to know? Fang Heng asked. The reason? What's the reason? Hey. The reason. Zai let out a light, almost carefree laugh. Fang Heng, what do you think? Fang Heng fell silent for a moment, then asked, is it for me? Right on. Zai responded with approval. You've seen Mukingson and Suzu, so you should know. They, like me, are cultivators. Mukingson chose to fuse with the power of the Death Realm. Suzu chose to fuse with the power of the Divine. As for me, Zai paused, then said lightly, I chose to fuse with the power of Hell. Besides us, there are other competitors. To cultivate the perfect seed of Ouroboros, they're all choosing various powers to fuse with. The seed of Ouroboros has always been a battle of internal conflict, survival of the fittest. Once the fusion and cultivation are complete, all the inferior ones will be devoured and transformed into nourishment for the superior ones. Zai said calmly, this cultivation battle will last a long time. You just unintentionally killed Suzu, which made this round of war start earlier than expected. Next, you'll face competition from other cultivators who are cultivating their seeds. It was the first time Feng Heng had heard Zai talk about the true nature of the Ouroboros, and he fell silent, his mind racing. For now, Zai's explanation was mostly in line with his suspicions. So what exactly is the Ouroboros? Ouroboros is the term outsiders use to refer to our group. I am an Ouroboros, and you are the chosen cultivator I selected. The seed of Ouroboros power has fused with your body. Chapter 2808, Black Fog. Feng Heng, our race has been destroyed time and time again, only to be reborn from the ashes of death. Through countless generations of cultivators, each rebirth has made us stronger. There can only be one who survives among the cultivators. That individual will become our new king. Feng Heng ran his hand through his hair, trying to piece everything together. From the moment he was being hunted by the spawn creatures, he had suspected that the Ouroboros within him was most likely connected to Zai. So, the environment he was in right now was extremely dangerous, and he could encounter attacks from other Ouroboros at any moment. What should I do? Very good, Feng Heng, you've already learned how to seek help from your cultivator. Zai paused for a moment, then continued, your current situation is more dangerous than you might think, but it's alright, I will help you. You should go to the Western District Federation. Go there for what? Go and address your weaknesses, completely unravel the shackles the Black Fog has placed on you. Outside the Black Fog, in the outer world, you're still too weak and could easily become a breach for other cultivation subjects. Zai explained, the spawn creatures and the origin of the Black Fog have been in conflict for many years. They understand better than we do how to counter the Black Fog, and they also know how to harness its power. They will help you fully unlock the shackles, so you can tap into the strength within the Black Fog outside of it. But be careful, Zai added. You must have noticed that the relationship between us and the spawn creatures has always been bad. To be precise, in recent years, all cultivators have been hunted by them. Additionally, there's another piece of bad news. The spawn creatures have already deployed the star map system on the planet. If your blood sample data is transmitted into the spawn creature's main system, I believe they will immediately recognize your identity and launch a new hunt against you. So, for this mission, I recommend you proceed with extra caution. Feng Heng fell into silence again, his mind racing. The spawn creatures. The locks. The locks had always prevented abilities in the game from being carried out into the real world. The Central Federation was known to have the most knowledge about these locks. All attempts to disable the lock abilities were controlled by the Central Federation. From Zai's side, it seemed that the spawn creatures had a better method of unlocking the locks. Are you sure about this information? Of course, I'm certain. Alright, that's enough for today's conversation. Wait. What should I do after I go to the Western District Federation? How should I contact you? You don't need to contact me, Zai responded. You'll have to figure out how to unlock the lock on your own. If you have other ideas, you can try those as well. I'm just offering advice, nothing more. Before Feng Heng could ask any more questions, Zai had already closed the communication. Great. It used to be that Feng Heng would avoid Zai like the plague, but now she had hung up on him first. Feng Heng put down his phone, shaking his head in exasperation. Thinking about it, Zai's words weren't completely unreasonable. In the real world, he couldn't even use half of his abilities from the game, and that made him vulnerable to being a breach for his enemies. He had to make sure to close this gap quickly. At the moment, his zombie clone and the Undead Council were busy transporting supplies in the Death Realm. Gu Qingzu was also heading to the Central Federation to gather intelligence while the Federation was in disarray. This was the perfect opportunity for Feng Heng to head to the Western District Federation to check things out. But still, did the spawn creatures truly have the method to break all the locks? No matter how he thought about it, Zai had no reason to deceive him. Feng Heng quickly made a decision. He would first head to the Northern District Federation to get a sense of the situation. And also, Feng Heng remembered that the Black Castle had always been focused on the spawn creatures' mission line. If something was related to the spawn creatures, the Black Castle should have plenty of leads on the matter. He could verify things indirectly through them. With that thought in mind, Feng Heng opened his phone and found Fauna's contact information. He tried dialing the number. The people from the Black Castle had been tracking the spawn creatures' mission line, and they might know some information. Unfortunately, Fauna's phone was turned off. The Black Castle was always elusive, so it wasn't surprising that Feng Heng couldn't get in touch with them. After thinking for a moment, Feng Heng dialed Old Black's number instead. Old Black sounded in a good mood. When he heard Feng Heng's voice, he chuckled and said, "Mr. Feng, you're working hard. You've really managed to acquire a lot of materials this time. It'll take some time to process them. If we try to move them too quickly, we won't get a good price. If you're in a hurry, I can advance you part of the payment." It's not urgent, I'm not calling you for that. Hey, what is it then? Did you stumble upon another lucrative opportunity? Fang Heng asked. Old Black, do you know anything about the Northern District Federation? Oh, I know a bit about it. You're referring to the Star Map project, right? I didn't expect the Western District Federation to be so bold, going ahead with the Star Map project despite the opposition from several other federations. Old Black said, pausing for a moment. Then, with a hint of curiosity, he added, what's up? Are you interested in the Star Map project too? To be honest, it's a very dangerous venture, and I've heard some rumors. Apparently, the high-ups in the Central Federation are the ones pushing for this. The opinions within the Federation's leadership aren't unified, and there's a lot of internal conflict. From my perspective, this situation isn't as simple as it seems. He paused again, then with a grin, he continued, but if you want to get involved, I'm more than willing to follow you into danger. In fact, Old Black had learned some insider information about the project a week earlier.